I've got one word for you, and since I am a wordsmith, expected to be on a high level. Wow. Wow. So we were supposed to today get one wow classic game, and we were supposed to get one wow dominating performance, but they were juxtaposed this afternoon. Wow. So the classic game was Arizona State pushing Texas to the wire. And actually, I thought they were the better team, but that doesn't matter. Texas won. And then what we just witnessed was the classic game turned into the classic rout domination. Ohio State sprints out to a 34-0 lead, and they basically put it on cruise control and wipe out the state of Oregon. 41-21. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We will take your calls. Don't need to go through my analysis because this is for you. So we take your calls and we are going to go to it. We've got on the Oregon channel, the Oregon guys are going at it and they're taking your calls and doing all the things that they do post game. So join Ben and Spaz on the Oregon channel. If you don't want to listen to me, they're on the Oregon channel. And then we've got the Ohio State guys, of course, with Mike and JR on the Buckeyes channel, and they're probably have more of a voice and a throat right now to throw a celebration than I could possibly do right now. But let's get right to it. Let's start with our buddy Minnesota Dave checking in tonight.
Hey, how's it going, Mark?
Hey, Dave.
What a great win for your Ohio State Buckeyes. They dominated right from the beginning, and it was basically high school kids versus like pros. That's what it looked like to me. I mean, I've never seen Oregon play this bad in a long time. In a very long time.
I really have nothing else to say about Ohio State's performance other than anything that they did wrong was after the game was decided. So any misplays on defense, anything on offense, getting stopped, anything, that was after the game was long decided. Yeah, Oregon had a little bit of a push there at the end of the first half. They scored, of course, with no time left to put up the 8, and then they come out and they put up another touchdown, 34-15 with their kind of offense. Certainly they had a breath of life there once they scored that second touchdown, but Ohio State quickly put the clamps on it. And it was quickly by showing that, hey, we're not going to give up any more points and started sacking Dillon Gabriel again. I don't know what they finished with. They had 6 sacks sometime in the fourth quarter. But, wow, it was devastating.
Is there such thing as too much rest?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what it looked like.
Well, if you remember, Dave, there was a time when these teams would – the one that I can remember, of course, it'll involve Ohio State as well, is in 2006 when they were the consensus number 1. They had every number 1 vote in the country, undefeated 12-0. And back then, of course, there was no Big Ten championship game. So their season was over around November 25th. The BCS championship game wasn't until like January 7th or 8th. So they sat for almost like 56 days. So nobody has to do that now, and they got clobbered by Florida, and there was not just that particular game, but other teams that had to sit that long and came out stale and maybe rusty, and you almost have a different football team at that point, almost 2 months. But for Oregon, they just played the first weekend of, so we're sitting here on January 1st. They played on December, whatever the date was, that Saturday. So that was 3 weeks ago.
December 8th.
So they played 3 weeks and a couple days ago.
Yeah, it was just, I've never seen the dominance. Just Oregon being manhandled like that was just made me wonder if the game was played at the regular season game was played at Columbus. I think it would have been a different outcome. I think Ohio State would have probably easily won that game.
Yeah, well, this is a new college football, because my first thought when you said that was it doesn't matter. Ohio State lost to Michigan. Ohio State lost to Oregon. And now they're in a position, it was running through my mind, and not everyone's going to agree with me. And I don't even know if I agree with myself. It's just a thought that the days gone by of let's put your Minnesota Gophers in this situation of the Wisconsin game being just, it's still going to be really important. You hate those guys, you want to beat them. But if you're on your way to a national championship game, possibly, then, I'm sitting here watching this game thinking, this is when we make the comment about this becoming like the NFL, this is what it reminds me of. Think of all the hated rivalries, your Minnesota Vikings against the Bears and the Lions and the Packers.
Mm-hmm.
But would you trade winning a Super Bowl championship for losing 2 games to the Packers? Well, of course you would. You go 12-5 and you go through the wild card route, or you win the division, whatever it is, and you go and win the Super Bowl. Sure, you didn't like losing to the Packers, but
I get to finally say we're NFL championship. That's huge. We're Super
it's
Bowl
starting to
champs.
have that feel in college football. And again, I'm just one person. I don't know what other people are feeling or thinking, but where it's going to be, how many times have we seen teams lose big rivalry games in the NFL, Ravens, Steelers, and in all these various matchups, and then they get revenge later, or they never even see that team again, but they go on and win Super Bowls, and it's kind of forgotten.
And one more thing, Mark, before I go, scatta me, scatta you, scatta boo. That is one heck of performance. I told you last night. I told you that they're going to make a game out of this. I have picked them to win it. I was hoping that they would. Actually, I actually ended up winning money on it because I bet Arizona State to beat the spread, so I still won a good chunk of money.
You were closer than I was, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was amazed on how that second half was, and you just think about it. If they get a field goal that wasn't blocked, they would have probably won. Heck, Texas had chances to win in the in regular time. Their kicker missed 2 in crucial situations, and he's usually clutch for them.
Yes.
That was one heck of a game, and I'm sorry to say this, when it was 24-8, I turned my TV on mute and started falling asleep. I didn't wake up until the interception happened for Texas in overtime. And I was like, what the heck happened? So I had to go watch the highlights to this. And I missed one heck of a game. One heck of a game.
Oh, you went to sleep. You actually did go to sleep.
I was getting pissed off at the game. I was thinking, Texas
it
is
was
going to win this game. And
it
especially
was
the way
of a
one
final
heck of
10
a
minutes.
start by Texas, and then all of a sudden Arizona State defense just clutched down and basically bared down and basically stopped Texas's offense, and it
They
was just
looked,
one.
after Texas scored that touchdown to make it 24-8, Arizona State looked like an NFL team. They looked great the final 10 minutes. Everything they did was exceptional. Their defense, Texas put up those first 2 touchdowns with the long passes and then the punt return, go up 14-3, and they had 1 field goal drive where they moved the ball, looked good. But man, there was a stretch. I did a video. It was like, I don't remember the yardage totals. It was ridiculous. Texas had like 8 yards over the
per
course
play.
of 6 or 7 drives.
Yeah, it was crazy. If you just look at the stats, and like Scattaboo, I mean, he had 140 yards rushing, and then he caught the ball for another 99 yards. I mean, it's ridiculous. And he threw for a touchdown.
And threw a touchdown.
I mean, what a heck of a performance by this kid. You were thinking he was just an average running back. He's not average.
Who said he was an average running back?
You did. You did. He thought he was going to be crushed.
Whoa. Somebody asked me if I thought he was the best back in the nation, and I said, I don't think so. And I was watching the game in the second half thinking, okay, maybe I've got to say that maybe he might be the best back in the nation. Maybe I stuck my foot in the mouth. I didn't say he was average. I said he was one of the 5 best backs in the nation after somebody said that. I said, well, he's in the top 5. They call him average. A
All
little difference
right,
between
Mark.
being average, being one of the 5 best backs in the nation.
Okay, yeah, he's just amazingly good. And is he declaring for the draft, or does he have a couple more years with Arizona State?
Oh, he's going to be in the NFL draft.
All right, yeah, because I would. Whoever gets him is going to get a great running back, even though running backs are not like the highest priority in the NFL. Unfortunately, they're just not used as they used to be.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
Well,
All
Mark,
right, Big Dave. Anything
I'll
else
let you
here?
go. Nothing else, Mark. I'll let you go.
Appreciate you
And have,
calling.
way to go, Ohio State. Beat Texas, because I know you're a big Ohio State guy. So good luck in that game against Texas.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
Okay, bye-bye.
Trying to figure out how to configure this stupid screen to get these stats on here and the other stuff we like to display. For some reason, I don't know if somebody screwed around with this. We got way too many people on this network these days, man. It used to be so much easier when it was just me. We didn't have like 48 people running through this StreamYard fixing things or setting things up. I don't really know how to do this. Okay. Well, there we go. That's the best we can do. I think that'll work. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We get the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine.
Congrats to your Ohio State Buckeyes. Mark,
Yes, congratulations to them.
how do they lose? How do they lose in this tournament?
Well, they're still playing a couple talented, extremely talented teams coming up, Texas and then whoever.
I get it, Mark, but after the 2 performances today, I mean, it's going to take a lot to convince me they're not the best playing team in the nation, and they don't have they have clearly the highest ceiling, in my opinion, of any team in the country. And I think that Michigan game, while it's odd to say, you all losing that game may have been the best thing for Ohio State in terms of winning the national championship.
And I believe you said that at the time. I could never bring myself to saying that, but I believe you conjectured that that was a possibility at the time.
Yeah. Do you think that's turned out true? Do you think they've just gotten this mindset of let's ignore all the haters, let's ignore all the fans that says we're soft, let's just do what we do best and just throw it around and just dominate everybody with their skill players? Do you think there was a culture change, a mind shift change that happened at Ohio State between the Michigan game and the Tennessee game? Because it sure looks like it to me.
Well, Will Howard keeps using this term that they're playing mad. And I don't think when you win, you're playing mad. So what got them mad? Well, we know what got them mad. So I think it has put a chip on their shoulder.
Right. And I mean, to do what they did against Oregon and just completely, like, Oregon looked like they didn't even belong in the same universe as them. And we know Oregon's one of the 4 best teams in the country based on the way they've played all season. Is very, very shocking and very, very impressive. Mark, is Jeremiah Smith just the best player in college football? No doubt about it.
Well, that's another thing that he just looked like an exceptional athlete that was having the beginning of a great career a couple weeks ago. But here in the last couple weeks, he has just seemed to be unguardable. You know, we see Ryan Williams at Alabama, who's off to a great start and obviously doesn't have the offense or the quarterback to play with. But, he's still developing physically. Jeremiah Smith is a monster. They put up a graphic to compare him against Terrell Owens and Julio Jones physically in terms of size. And he's been a student of the game. He arrived on campus as a guy that already had studied the wide receiver position, route running. He wasn't just like this amazing athlete that thought, I got a lot to learn. I remember Jack Sawyer at Big Ten Media Days made a comment that he said, I heard so much about this guy and I thought, people are putting a lot of pressure on him. People are saying he's going to be a starter. Now, come on, this is Ohio State. Give him back off, give him some time to ease into it. He said, 1 practice. I was on the field with the guy for 1 practice and I thought, this dude's ready. He's He's ready to go. He is ready to be a star.
Right. It reminds me similar of when Nick Saban just announced in the spring Bryce Young was going to be the starting quarterback as a freshman for Alabama. Like, that's all I needed to know. And that's similar how I feel about Jeremiah Smith. That's all
You and me. That reminds me a bit of a quarterback like top 10 or 25, whatever it was that I put out that year prior to the season. People were like, I named Bryce Young the second best quarterback in the country. I don't remember who was number one. Maybe I named him first or second. People thought I was crazy. And I said, all I needed to know is that every time Nick Saban's had a quarterback battle, he actually let it play out through the spring. So you can name your really good Alabama quarterbacks, whether that's Blake Sims or that's Jake Coker or that's Jalen Hurts, and they had to battle for the job. If he tells me that Bryce Young, before he stepped on the field in spring camp, is the starting quarterback, I'm going to say, this guy's as good as his billing. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
No doubt about it, Mark. We got to talk about the other game because it was surprising that, to me, Texas kind of was just letting Arizona State hanging around with bad play calling, a terrible pick in the fourth quarter, missed field goals. I know Arizona State deserves a ton of credit, but Texas has done this throughout the entire year and let bad teams like Mississippi State and those caliber of teams hang around all year.
Kentucky.
Yes, exactly. Do you think exactly? Do you think this is just another case of this and them finding a way to win, or do you think this shows, hey, Texas, we thought they were one of the 5 best teams. Maybe they're in the Tennessee type range. We're one of their top 10 range.
Well, you just if your evaluation is accurate, you just stated that Oregon, you still believe to be one of the 4 best teams in the country, and they just got steamrolled. So Texas is one of the best teams in the country. But I think that Arizona State game and their effort, I don't want to take anything away from Arizona State. I don't think they stayed in the game on tipped passes or fumbles or miscues or special teams blunders or anything like that. They were actually the better team from halftime until the end of the regulation on into the overtime. So Texas showed a lot of resilience, giving up that 16-point lead and then giving up a touchdown to start overtime and then completing a 4th and 13 to win, to keep their season alive. But Arizona State, wow, defensively from the first 2 plays that produced the first touchdown, the second one was obviously a punt return. They shut down the Texas offense. They did not give up a touchdown for 42 minutes of game time.
Yeah, it's impressive. I was surprised with the way they were able to compete.
Yeah, I was too.
Do you think being Arizona State, they had 4 red zone opportunities and only scored 11 points? I know Arizona State's field goal kicker is absolutely atrocious, and that's been a common thing under the Kyle Dillingham era. But do you think at some point you would just decide to take the points, Mark, instead of just keep going for it on 4th and goal, 4th down in the red zone?
Well, I think there's a difference between being a bad field goal kicker and being an inexperienced field goal kicker. So this kid kicked his first field goal in the Big 12 championship game, and he went 2 for 3 today. So he actually had a better day than the other kicker, Bert Auburn, an experienced and accomplished field goal kicker. But I think that was part of Kenny Dillingham's thought process, was that Texas had the better team, and when they had scoring opportunities, they need to cash them in.
I know. It just, retroactively looking back at it, if they just got 6 points out of those field goals, when they were in the red zone, they probably win this football game. And it would have complained completely differently. But, yeah, I don't like the aggressive nature of college football, especially when you're the underdog. I think you should just take the points while you have the chance to take them. But, they decided not to, and I think that was one of the reasons they lost the football game. Mark, there are a lot of Big 12 fans are upset with the non-targeting call with about a minute to go in the game. Did you think that was a targeting call against Tech? It should have been called targeting against Texas?
I did not believe that it was targeting, no. because he hit the player not with his helmet. Don't believe it was targeting.
Well,
Targeting has to do. It's not a obligatory target, meaning anywhere on your body to target to hit the other player with like I'm targeting with my elbow. No, it's with the helmet and specifically the crown of the helmet. And so I didn't exactly know what they were reviewing.
I didn't think it was targeting either, but a lot of the Big 12 ecosystem out there, Mark, is claiming it was targeting and was rigged or they got robbed and all that stuff because of that targeting call. So I just wanted your thoughts about it.
Yeah, well, as many times as I can, I go to all the various team channels and I run a poll for that week, and I simply put game winner, and then I put both teams. And guess what? 90% of the fans on that team channel vote for their team to win the game, regardless of how much of an underdog they are. That goes to show us that people are just flat out biased and they see what they want to see.
I got you. It's just interesting to me how people just go to such extremes, hearing it from one place versus another place. It's just funny to me.
And I understand if, let's say, you're just a blanket Big 12 fan. For one thing, it's kind of strange because your representative is a one-year wonder in the Big 12. They're a new entry, and here you are, maybe a Kansas State, Kansas fan, TCU, Texas Tech, whomever, and you've got these staunch roots in the Big 12, the former Big 8 or the Southwest Conference, and you're riding everything on Arizona State, who just joined the league. And I thought, and I stated this a number of times, that now I definitely think that Arizona State, based on the championship game performance and based on the performance today, has distanced itself from the rest of the Big 12. But leading into the final weekend of play and also the final weekend of play in the regular season, who knew who the best team in the Big 12 was between BYU and Arizona State, Kansas State, Iowa State, Colorado, that I was thinking they're only going to get one bid, and you could pretty much just flip a 5-sided coin to determine who would represent the Big 12 in the playoff and make the argument, well, the other four teams, who knows what would have happened because they probably would have done the same thing. But I do think that Arizona State differentiated itself. But the Big 12, again, the fans of the Big 12, I can empathize with them only having one bid, one team. That team loses, and that's your one shot. Now, fortunately for them, for anyone who's really objective about the situation, that's actually the best performance out of the Big 12 the entire season. That loss is the best performance and game result from that entire conference this season, losing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm, Mark, as a just college football fan in general, just taking a step back, I'm so happy Texas won this football game, because the expansionist crowd, if Arizona State would have won, would have said, we got to expand it further. We need to go to 16 or 24 or even 32 teams. See, the SEC and Big Ten are just colluding, and we need these 9-3 Big 12 teams like Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, all can be in there. They all have a chance. And it would have just, honestly, in my opinion, it could have completely ruined the sport if Arizona State had won today because of the ramifications of that argument. So I'm just so thankful that all the quote-unquote lesser teams got absolutely killed except for Arizona State. I think it honestly saved the sport.
I noticed a comment that was made, and I believe the audio is taken from Brett Yormark. You don't see the video, you just hear the audio during what are called these institutionals. They're promoting the conference, and the networks are obligated to play these during athletic events. And I'm not watching it, but I'm listening to it. It's during halftime, and I hear the Big 12 at one point during that, and it's just a big, promotional talking about that we have the greatest conference known to humanity, and they all make them, of course. And so the Big 12 at one point during their braggadocious promotion, they say, and I believe again it's Brett Yormark stating that we've got the deepest conference in college football. The deepest what? And I almost took to Twitter to say deepest, like there you can be deep in a lot of things. I think one thing is coming to all of our minds that you could be deep in, and is that the Big 12? Like you're the deepest conference in America. Deepest of what? Anyway, it was a good day for the Big 12. I don't want to slam on the Big 12. It was a great day for the Big 12. But maybe that also emphasizes the state of the league, that it was a great day for the Big 12 and that their team lost.
Right. Do you know what happened on that 4th and 13 play? How that Golden was just so wide open?
Well, as I recall, he was in the slot and he burned the guy right in front of him. Then the safety had a decision to make, and he put a move on him that I don't know why the safety was so far out of position, but I just saw the one replay, but that's what I recall seeing.
Right. Yeah, just inexcusable to me, Mark. But
yeah, exactly. I thought the same thing, not to cut you off, Dareal. As soon as that ball was coming out of Ewer's hands and I see Golden in the clear, I'm thinking this was 4th and 13. How did they allow this to happen?
Yeah, that's another one of those questionable play calls or defenses. I just think this game from both sides of it was poorly coached. Like an example of that was Texas near the end of the game with 2 minutes to go. I don't know why they decided to throw it on 1st and 2nd down. You run, in my opinion, you run the ball twice. That way you're at least getting closer to field goal range. You're having some success running the football against Arizona State at that particular point in the game. And you force Arizona State to use both of their timeouts that they had remaining. That way, if you miss the field goal or you get the field goal and you kick it off, Arizona State has no timeouts and they have to go drive the length of the field. I don't understand those play calls by Sark there.
Well, to quote my buddy James Coleman, he says that every play call is obviously designed to succeed. Now, yeah, I was thinking that they might get themselves into a time issue by throwing the football, either by throwing 2 quick passes, then they would set themselves up to throw another incompletion or a short gain on 3rd down and then have to kick a field goal and leave time on the clock for Arizona State. That was what I was thinking. But of course, from the standpoint of the clock management, as it turned out, that worked out. They just didn't advance the ball far enough.
Right. Well, they also got lucky with Arizona State not being able to drive it. Then they had to kick it off. But I thought Texas could have milked that clock to about a minute left. You kick a 40-some yard field goal, you make it, then they have to drive the length of the field to win the game. That was where my thinking was at. I didn't think they would possibly get another possession, but Arizona State had a penalty, and then, they didn't execute. But, Mark, it was a good day of college football. I'm looking forward to Georgia Notre Dame tomorrow, so I'll see you then.
Thanks, Dareal. Appreciate it. And before we take the next call, since Dareal did mention Georgia and Notre Dame, I think we would be completely remiss as humans, much more important than the football, of course, which is just a game. That's what it comes down to. It's just a game. If this would have been explained to maybe people 400 years ago, but then again, those people put people in Roman Colosseums, of course. So I guess they would have understood to a certain extent. But maybe what they would not have understood is us actually allowing the losers of the games to live. They would have been, maybe prompted to beheading those folks. But anyway, these are just football games. And of course, we had a tragedy on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. And I was actually unaware of that waking up. I didn't hear the news until it was broadcast during the games today. And so for hopefully none of you have any loved ones or any family members, anyone connected to those events. So that is a horrific thing. And it just lets us know that there is evil in this world and despicable, horrible people that do horrendous things. So let's have our prayers go out to those people. So if you believe in God, certainly send up your prayers for anybody that was impacted by those events. I will be doing such tonight. All right, David, welcome in. How you doing?
How do you think I'm doing, Mark?
Guess you're doing great.
I'm doing really well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got to mute Desmond Howard here, Mark, so bear with me.
Oh, well, please do.
By all means, I have to do
that guy is stealing money.
Yes, I know.
Can we just not to rain on your parade and cut you off here, but
no, go ahead.
Desmond Howard to bed. The guy's an idiot. He's a horrible broadcaster. He's a horrible analyst. He sucks at what he does. He's pathetic. He is a pathetic professional. He's not a professional. He is not a professional.
No.
And it's just pathetic. He's negligent in his responsibilities as being a objective analyst, number one. Number two, he's not even a good analyst.
No.
I tweeted out today during halftime of the first game. I said, Reese Davis could sit up there by himself. He knows enough about football to be saying what even Joey Galloway's saying, who's much better than Desmond Howard, even though he's not one of my favorites. I think Galloway's pedestrian. He's okay. He fills the position. But Desmond Howard is the worst. He is horrible. I don't care who he played for. I'd be saying the same thing if he played for Ohio State or Texas or USC or whoever. He is horrendous at his job. He's terrible.
Well, just to show I'm keeping it even-handed, it's not all scum players. I actually thought, like, at times, like, remember when Brian Greasy did some games? I didn't think he was bad.
He was great. Yeah,
I thought he was solid. I even thought Charles Woodson at times did some decent work. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say he's great. He's better than
Dez. I don't think Woodson's okay.
Well, he's better than Dez, though, right? I mean,
he's well better than Dez, but he fills the seat. I've never learned anything from Charles Woodson. I'll say that. But he's not an embarrassment. And yeah, Brian Greasy, I thought he was really good.
Yeah, he was solid. All right, let's get into it, Mark, because what we just watched was two things. The best performance of the Ryan Day era, and ladies and gentlemen, you just saw the best team in college football tonight, in my opinion. That's about as good a half of football as I've seen in Ohio State since, would you say, the 59-0 against Wisconsin, maybe, Mark? I mean, is that the only one as far as like a half of football where they were on it, both sides of the ball? I mean, they dominated the line of scrimmage. They were aggressive offensively. The passing down the field was good. Jeremiah Smith is just at another level. Yes, I know I'm lopping it all on here, but I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong. Go ahead, Mark.
Like I said to the previous caller, they did nothing wrong until the game was out of hand. They were just they were just on point in every possible way. I am astounded at how good the offensive line is playing, considering what they've had to put up with and the injuries and the movements. They even mentioned Kirk Herbstreit sometime in the first half that they had to move Austin Sareveld, and did from left guard to right guard and brought in Luke Montgomery. Will Howard was obviously on point. The receivers, of course, you got to start with Jeremiah Smith, completely torched and abused anybody or anything that they tried to do. Everything was, the defense was on point.
Yeah.
Even did anyone hear or see a negative thing from really Davison Igbinosun or Denzel Burke?
No, not until the game was out of control. I mean, the one touchdown, I think, was it. But I thought the defensive game plan, I mean, they were really coached him up not to give anything deep. The thing that and I talked to a fellow Buckeye fan, JR, who hosts a show on for the Big Ten last night. And I said, of the two things, at least, and I'm going to get to the defensive side of the ball here first, were you more confident that Ohio State wouldn't give up big plays or get a pass rush? Well, guess what, Mark? Both happened. For the most part, they didn't give up big plays until, the last touchdown probably. That was just window dressing, like you said. And what can you say about this front seven and in particular this defensive line? They were getting after it. I thought the only way they could get a pass rush is if Knowles started to dial up blitzes. But the D line and that front seven was getting after it. I mean, Jack Sawyer has totally turned up his game at defensive line. Your guy Tyleek Williams inside has been unblockable. He was great today too. JTT, we had an APB out for JTT, Mr. 5-star, supposed to be great, is finally all of a sudden playing his best football. I mean, wow. Just wow. I mean, your thoughts on the defensive side of the football in particular, Mark?
Defensive line is playing better than any defensive front in the country. And I would have said a few weeks ago, I would have said that they're in the top 5 range. But they're the most outstanding unit in the country. And you're right. No blitz is needed.
Right.
And that was what made them look devastating against Indiana. They actually had a few blitzes against Tennessee, but they were pretty effective without the blitz. But to compare that Tennessee outfit in their passing attack to Oregon is there's no comparison. So they had to play so much better up front and in the secondary than they did the last time out against Tennessee. And this is not a good comparison, but who popped into my head when you said Jack Sawyer turning it on and now JTT is that Zach Harrison as a 5-star finally, like the last half of his final season, started to play like he was supposed to. Now, these guys have been really good players.
Yeah.
They've been like arguable top conference players, all Big Ten players, but not game wreckers. But now they're game wreckers and
right. Well, they're definitely helping their draft stock because, and I think that's kind of you used to mention all conference. That's kind of also the difference between, let's say, being like a, maybe a 3rd round, 2nd round pick to maybe playing yourself into the 1st round, of the draft, so they're only helping themselves there. And what have we bemoaned about them? Yeah, they're good players. They play the run well, but they weren't getting after the quarterback, Mark. And now we finally gotten it. And it's great to see. I have to say this too about the offensive game plan. There was a guy that called into your show after the loss of the team up north and was pretty down on that offensive game plan, Mark. And I don't know whether it was Chip Kelly. I don't know whether it was, Ryan Day or whoever was calling the plays that day. And first of all, do I have to give motivation to Scum for these performances for Ohio State? Do we have to do that, Mark? I mean, I don't want to give them credit for anything, but I mean.
Well, DarealMVP brought it up. I don't know the answer to that question other than Will Howard gives us a bit of a indication by telling us that they're playing mad. Well, I don't know that they would be too mad if they were walking in here undefeated or had lost to Oregon a zillion months ago. So that's what he's got to be referring to.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's where it's at. I mean, you have to think about it, Mark, because I mean, the 2 best performances of this football team season have, come in back-to-back games. I mean, it's just that simple, and I will say with this offensive performance and the game planning that I've bemoaned after the last regular season game that, it's just aggressive. See, here's the thing, Mark, and Day, I think it's the rivalry. He coaches tight in that game, Mark. It's that simple. He coaches tight. He coaches like basically what it is. He's feeling he's playing a team he doesn't need to score that many points against. Maybe if he can get to like 20 points, they'll win. And just don't make a mistake. And we're going to have this tight game plan. And I also think that winning the rushing battle for like 800 years, which has been ingrained in our memories for so long, decided the game also gets to him. I don't know.
Yeah, the whole thing about winning the rushing battle and the team that wins the rushing battle, well, that's number one, always been the case in football, period, not just in this game. But it's still, yes, would you rather have the rushing advantage over the other team in any football game now? Yes.
Right.
The importance level, though, compared to 1975 is not even close. You can win football games and lose the rushing battle. You couldn't do that in 1975 unless there was some egregious, issue with turnovers or something. So it's not that important. It's important, but it's not number one on the list, or maybe even 2 or 3.
But I mean, you got the best receivers in the country, including the best receiver in the country. I mean, you got to get him the football, And I think what happens is, and not coincidentally, Mark, his best performances before these 2 games came in playoff games. The Georgia game, what they were saying his best loss was, the Clemson performance, in the COVID year. Because I think when he goes into these playoff games, and he kind of tipped his hand a couple years before the Georgia game, and I think partly, the defense wasn't the best that year, but he basically said before Stroud had that incredible performance and the offense looked so good against Georgia, is he says, in these playoff games, you got to score north of 40 points to win. You know what I mean? And I think that's where it all comes from. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, just being more aggressive with the game planning.
Well, I just don't think it's playoff games. I think it's the Michigan game.
Well,
because they're aggressive in other Big Ten games.
Okay. I mean, to a degree, yes, I guess I would say that. I mean, were they aggressive against Penn State or aggressive against, some of these other teams? Yeah, the big thing is I was confident they could score points against this Oregon defense. You know what I mean? I just didn't think Oregon's secondary could match up with our receivers. And I thought we could hold up well enough in pass pro to do a lot of business. That was the other thing that gave me a lot of confidence coming into this one.
Well, that first Oregon game is pretty fresh in my mind. I just watched it.
Mm-hmm.
And Ohio State's receivers had to earn a lot of yardage in that game. They were good. They didn't make mistakes. They caught everything in sight, but they didn't get much after the catch at all. They were being tackled in space. As opposed to Ohio State's DBs not looking good, not just in coverage, but they were missing some tackles, or like in the case of Denzel Burke, getting dragged for 19 yards down the field by Evan Stewart. Today they were just electric. Yeah, it was something else to behold.
Yeah, I thought that, kind of seeing the Penn State game and some other games where they played this year, I thought that, especially with our receivers, as long as our pass pro was just halfway decent, I knew there were going to be some shots down the field I thought we could hit against them. And like I told you, it was one of the 2 best games Howard had played the entire year coming into this game.
The pass pro's been good all season.
Yeah, with the exception of maybe Nebraska and team up north, maybe,
I thought it was pretty good against Michigan. These teams are going to get home or are going to affect the passer from time to time. But, man, I thought that their pass pro was excellent against Tennessee, and I thought it was excellent in this game, and it has been, especially considering you're losing 2 of your 3 best offensive linemen. I think the pass pro has been great. It's the run game. Another positive from today was that the rush game was consistent. It was consistently good. It wasn't 1 yard, -1, 2, 0, 0, 1, 22, 0, 1. That's what it's been against any good opponents, but they were consistently running the ball well.
Well, you know what? I was going to say something about that. What have I also said with that, Mark? Where was the business mostly done? On the perimeter. Where was Trey Henderson's big run for the touchdown? It was on the perimeter. It always seems when he busts these big runs, they get him out wide. I talked to Zach Smith about this a couple years ago. He had said, because when Ohio State was busting those big runs back when the Dobbins era and the Zeke era, he said that the perimeter blocking was always top notch. He said a couple years ago, he had thought it gone downhill. Gotten much better this year. Much, much better this year. I did want to get to the early game. I'm still in glee here, but I just want to make a quick comment on it. I thought that Arizona State, I do think Arizona State played well. First of all, I think Scadaboo is just a beast of a running back, by the way. He is just... I think he could be something really serious, maybe even at the next level. What do you think?
Well, I think before we put a complete capper on the first game or the Rose Bowl game, we'll address what Mike Ford has. Our buddy Mike Ford is getting rather sickened by hearing all the accolades being poured on Ohio State. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah,
They just
Mike, what do you want?
freaking crushed the number one team in the country and completely ran them out of the state and off the map. That was the most impressive performance in college football the entire season. It's not even close.
Well, Mike is looking through everything through his maize and blue glasses. You'll have to pardon him.
And that's a completely objective statement I just made. That was the most impressive performance in college football this year.
Yeah, easily.
Then, I was thinking, okay, Ole Miss at home beating Georgia by 3 scores. There were a few other ones that come to mind, but that can't be debate. You could be the staunchest Michigan fan, and if you have half a brain or any integrity, then that's not even debatable.
You're asking for a lot from that crowd, Mark. You're asking for a lot.
It's not debatable.
You're asking for a lot from that crowd, Mark. But I digress. We could have won 50-something-0 today, and Fort would have found something wrong with it, I'm sure. But I would make a quick comment on the early game. What I would say is, first of all, how good do you think Scadaboo is? I mean, does he look like he could be an NFL running back, or is this guy maybe just a good college player? Or?
He's better than I thought he was.
Yeah,
and they keep telling us that he lost they've shown the pictures of the before and after, and Kenny Dillingham challenged him to get cut up and all those things, and that he was not fast enough and he lost weight and he got cut up, and that he's running 22 miles an hour or something.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying. So if he's doing that, he's certainly tough enough and strong enough. My goodness, did you see how many times that he was breaking tackles and just carrying guys? Now, somebody did send me a stat. Guy named Shooter sent me a long email that had a bunch of stats from Arizona State and Texas. Now, I did not realize that as good as Texas's defense is, that they were 103rd in the nation in missed tackles.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't. Yeah, I mean, I thought their front seven was. To me, it was coupled by the fact why I was impressed with Scadaboo. Is this a really good? I thought Texas front seven he was going against today.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the best defenses in the SEC. Although, with the SEC this year, I mean, I keep on wondering how many top-notch offenses are in the SEC this year. You know what I mean?
Well, how many top offenses are in the country?
Well, other than the two I thought we saw at the Rose Bowl, I didn't think there were that many this year.
Yeah.
Right.
And we will certainly wait to see how things play out, but we'll have this Big Ten SEC discussion, but it's leaning heavily in one direction.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, I had thought, by the way, that maybe the three best. I thought coming in the playoff, a case could be made that the 3 or 4 best teams in the playoff were from the Big Ten, or the North, I should say.
Well, I thought that the 4 best teams in the country were 2-2: Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, with potential at Notre Dame getting into the conversation, and then Penn State.
I think Penn State beats either Notre Dame or Georgia. I do.
I was not impressed with Penn State last night.
Yeah, but you know what? Georgia's offense has been anemic. Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. They'd have a better chance with John Stockton at quarterback. I don't know. I mean, I'm not.
Well, he can distribute.
Well, that's true. But I mean, is that just going to be a rock fight tomorrow? Are we expecting that like 16-13, 19-16, something like that, 17-16?
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
I mean, the passing game will be lacking in both ways. I will say this. I haven't gotten a chance to make this comment tomorrow. I think Notre Dame would be smart to take some of that Georgia Tech game plan, with what Georgia Tech did with Haynes King, do some of that quarterback run with Riley Leonard tomorrow, implement some of that.
Absolutely.
What your thoughts are on that?
Those Notre Dame backs are serious. They're much better than the Georgia Tech backs. And then Riley Leonard, Haynes King comparison, it's actually a decent one. I think Riley Leonard's maybe a little bit better, but not much.
Yeah. I mean, I think that now I still think Notre Dame's got limitations in the passing game. And that's inevitably, what's usually the best way to attack a Georgia defense. I mean, you got to get vertical. You got to throw the ball down the field. I mean, trying to run the ball against their front seven,
to your point, David, everybody left outside of Ohio State has limitations in the passing game. Georgia has dropped more passes than any team in college football.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I'm leaning Notre Dame tomorrow. I don't know if you've already put your pick out there.
My pick's out there.
Okay, I'll have to check it out. But yeah, that's my lean. I mean, I think it's a field goal game one way or another. I don't have a lot of confidence in it. I think I said something like 17-16 on a field goal at the end. But I mean, I do think Texas, I just have to say this about them and that performance. I think, by the way, you still see some issues with that offensive side of the football. And just Quinn Ewers from time to time, one of the key plays, I mean, other than the Scattaboo throw, he totally underthrew. Was it Bond on that interception, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
At 24-16? I mean, that was bad.
Yeah, and Jesse Palmer did a nice job of outlining how he should have thrown the ball. So once you got the perspective of deep behind the secondary, Bond got open. He was running away from the defender, and he needed to drill that thing down the seam. He allowed the safety to come all the way over and pick that off by just lofting it up there.
I mean, I really like Ohio State's chances. I know, we're in the euphoria of these last two performances for Ohio State, but
yeah.
I just think they match up well with Texas. I mean, I don't know what Texas brings to the table from an offensive perspective, especially with kind of the ups and downs of yours this year, to where they can score some points against Ohio State's defense.
My one concern, because I think it should be a concern for almost every team, because I think this is the most difficult unit to keep intact and keep playing well all the time, because the speed on the defensive side and the edge rushers are just so good, is again the offensive line. And
right.
I continue to credit the Ohio State Pass Pro because I think it's been exceptional, but they're going to have to do it again. And sometimes matchups are different. And even if you can't really separate the Texas pass rush from the Oregon pass rush statistically, sometimes they're just matchups that work or don't work.
I think as long as Will Howard continues to do what he does, which is distribute, take care of the football, not have that one or two bonehead throws that I talked about early in the year, I think Ohio State's going to be fine. I really do. I want to say this, Mark. I just have to say, with the game tomorrow at 4:00. By the way, I just want to say condolences and send out prayers to the people that lost loved ones today. I think it's horrific and just tragic what happened there, and just shows the senseless violence in the society. It's just it's bad, and it's unfortunate that things had to happen that way. And I wasn't surprised that they did what they did with the game. I think they had no choice, and I think it was the right thing to do.
Do you remember Jack Besh? He is a wide receiver at TCU. He was at LSU. So anyway, I saw a story on ESPN.com that his brother was a special teams player and / wide receiver at TCU from like 2017 to 19, that he was one of the victims.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I mean, was it 15 total, I believe, Mark? Or I haven't heard an exact
that's the last total I heard.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, and it's just a game, folks. But, that's why we want to, offer up thoughts and prayers for those people. And, tomorrow, 4:00, Mark, will you be doing a post game after the game then tomorrow? Will you be going live?
That's the plan.
All right, my friend. Well, it's a great day to be a Buckeye, OH, my friend, and good chance I might be talking to you tomorrow.
Thanks for the call, David. Enjoy.
As always, a pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We'll take these calls in order, as we always do. We got Michael on the line. Michael, how you doing?
Hey, Mark. Good, sir. Somewhat shell-shocked.
After watching the Rose Bowl?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I did not see that happening. I'm like,
I don't think anybody did.
I knew Ohio State had decent offense, but where was this against Michigan? Why didn't they do this against Michigan? And why didn't they do it against Oregon the first time?
Well, they put up 31 points the first time against Oregon.
Yeah, but what was the score? Well, it wasn't like 34-8 at halftime, though.
No, it wasn't. And
It
if they
could've-
played Oregon next week, it most likely would not be 34-8 at halftime.
No, it might be 42-0. No, I'm just kidding. But first of all, my deepest condolences to the families and friends of the one that lost their lives there and fighting for their lives in New Orleans today. That is so stupid. And I see some people said they should be playing right now. And like, is this what Americans come to? There was a terrorist act and they want people to play football right now? No, it's insanely stupid. But I digress, though.
Yeah, well, there's nothing really to say because that's just pure evil, anyone who wants to destroy other lives.
Yeah. Oh, how's your crow pie right now?
How is my
After
who?
crow pie about what you said about Mr. Scatterboo last night.
What in I'm
said
not
he's
understanding what
You said he's gonna have 89 yards last night.
okay.
And
Yeah.
at one point today, he had more total offense than Texas did combined.
Yeah, well, my comment had nothing to do with how much Texas would have an offense, and he ran for what, like 143?
Yeah.
So I said 89, so I was wrong. What do you want me to say? I don't know what
Mark,
to tell you.
I'm just messing with you. But I
Yeah.
gotta ask you this.
Yeah, he played a great game, and I underestimated him. And the Arizona State offensive line.
On the deflected pass that Arizona caught, I'm mad at the Big Ten because that was targeting today.
Okay, I don't believe that it was. So why was it targeting?
Okay, how many times have you seen this year in other games a similar play and they call it targeting and it's confirmed or it's upheld?
Well, I only saw one replay. I got to say I didn't give it a whole lot of thought because I just did not see it as targeting. So I would have to go back and look at exactly what the contact looked like. But from my recollection, I did not see headgear, crown of the helmet contacting anyone.
Yeah, but anyway, no, it's stuff like that. Yeah, I was kind of surprised though, like when Arizona State was down there and stuff like that. I mean, what was you supposed to do knowing your field goal team wasn't that good this year? Would you have done the same thing the other 4 times Kenny Dillingham did when he was down there?
Yeah, I don't have any complaints nor any criticisms for Dillingham other than in terms of him going for it, other than there was one time that to me, with as well as his defense was playing in Texas, again, from the time they scored their second touchdown, which was on a punt return, so that wasn't even offense. So they boom down the field, touchdown, with the punt return included, and it had 2 long passes to set up the first touchdown. They went 42 minutes of game time without scoring a touchdown, only had one decent drive for a field goal. That one of those times, Arizona State's at the 37, and they've got like a 4th and 12.
Yeah.
Punt the ball. Punt the ball. Punt it hopefully inside the 5-yard line and bury them. Your defense is playing great. That's number one, because against one of the best defenses in the country, the odds of you getting a 4th and 12 conversion are like 10%. The only other one that I had issues with is they ran Scatterboo, I think twice when it was like 4th and 3. And I just thought that was way too far to try to slam him ahead for 3 yards against that Texas defense.
Yeah, because they said at one point today he was like literally throwing. I wonder if he won 100% today, though. Because at one point they said he was like thrown up on the sidelines.
Well, yeah, I got to say that we can all assume that he was 100% to start the game, but it was being reported from the sideline by the sideline reporter that, yeah, throwing up on the sidelines. He took himself out of the game a few times, so he wasn't feeling well. But, man, he was a monster in the 4th quarter.
Yep. Okay, my last thing is points going to be at a premium next Thursday with Ohio State and Texas. Because you could probably have the two best defensive teams. And I got to tip my hat to Jim Knowles for having a great game plan today.
Yeah, well, if this game goes anything, and I'm not predicting an Ohio State blowout or anything because I think Texas is too good for that. But We didn't expect one against Tennessee. We did not expect one, except for our buddy Troy V is letting us know he picked the Buckeyes by 22 points. But anyway, the way Ohio State's playing, the points may be at a premium for Texas, but not for Ohio State.
So you're saying that, I mean, because I figured you got the two best defenses. Or do you think Texas defense is, or do you think, I mean, yeah, maybe Ohio State's defense is a little bit better than Texas, but are they maybe top 5 defenses?
Those two?
Country? Yeah.
Absolutely, they are.
Yep. So,
Okay,
I
here
mean,
are your 5 best defenses in the country off the top of my head, not in order. Ohio State, Texas, Michigan. What, Penn State and Georgia?
I can see
Oh,
that.
Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Throw them in there too.
Yeah, I can see that. I just think something's gonna have to give next week and stuff like that. Because I was starting to get to the point today. I was agitated. I was like tweeting or posting something. It's like I'm literally getting tired of blowouts in this college football playoff. When are we going to have good games? And fortunately, we had one. But I thought the way the Texas game was going, I thought, here we go again with another blowout.
The Penn State Boise State game was a good game.
Yeah, sure. Even though the scores was 17 and stuff, but it's just like Boise State last night. Arizona State shot themselves in the foot several times today.
Yes, they did.
All right, sir. I hope 2025 get off to a great start for you.
I hope so too.
And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night around 8:00.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, see you, Mark.
Enjoy the game.
You too.
Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. But before we take a call, I appreciate the super chats coming in. So let's get to those. We've got Yakov chiming in with JJ is the modern day version of John Stallworth. Jeremiah Smith, John Stallworth. Well, certainly John Stallworth did not have the body build of Jeremiah Smith, but I get your point. All right, we got Terrence saying Ohio State is clearly the best team in the CFP. They're playing like it. And I've said here how many zillion times since week 1 and even going back into the offseason that Ohio State's the best team in the country. Now, they didn't look like that way against Nebraska. They didn't look that way against Michigan. Those were really the only 2 games they didn't look like the best team in the country. Now, they didn't play an A+ game against Oregon the first time, but if you're losing to the number 1 team in the country in the manner that they did, that's understandable. Okay, then we've got Chris. Oregon did not know what hit them. They did not. They did not know what hit them. You know what I always wonder when I see games like this that turn out, games that were supposed to be classics that turn out in this manner. And I did, not that I had a feeling, because I would be lying to all of you if I had some kind of feeling. I picked Ohio State to win. I was fairly confident, but not super confident. And thought it was going to be a really close game, thought it was going to be a great game. But there is a long history of great matchups that just don't turn out. So that happens. That happens. And you wonder, or at least I'm wondering right now, because this comes to mind sometimes, because like Dabo Swinney, when Clemson clocked Ohio State in the 2016 CFP 31-0, he basically talked after the game like, we knew that was going to happen. We knew we could do that. What we saw on tape, we could do that. You wonder, Dan Lanning and his staff, Ryan Day and their staff, especially considering they played, though, a great game down to the wire the first time, that they could have ever seen that coming. All right. And then finally, we've got Minnesota Dave saying, Howard Cosell was right all along. The jock announcer has totally taken over, and half of them don't know what they're doing. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit complicated. I hate to criticize people that do roughly the same thing that I'm doing, or roughly doing what I did in the past, or as long as somebody is doing, like, for example, if you've listened to me long enough, you know that there's a certain play-by-play announcer on Fox that I can't stand, but I don't bring it out very often because I don't like to criticize him, because from everything I've heard, he's a nice guy and he definitely applies himself to his work, and a lot of people love him. He's not my cup of tea. I don't think he's really good at what he does, but I hate to criticize him unless I'm asked about it. But in the case of Desmond Howard, he's just not doing his job. So he would be the worst in college football right now. All right. And that leads me into another comment that may get me in trouble with one of the two genders. So I heard a comment made the other day. There was arguments. I guess this was on Twitter. Somebody was making fun of one of the ESPN females that does the NFL shows. I don't know who she is. Mia somebody. I don't know who she is. Anyway, they were basically saying, get her off there. She doesn't know anything about football. And then I heard other people commenting that analysts, male analysts in football, making comments about that we excuse male college football or NFL analysts who didn't play the game. And I thought, those people don't exist. Name me one analyst in college or NFL football who did not coach or play at a high level. Who would that be? Nobody. Zero. All right. I got Muley on the line. Muley, what's going on?
How's it going, Mark?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. First off, I just want to extend the condolences. Well, not condolences, the prayers to New Orleans and stuff, and just really hope that also going forward, these things don't happen, and we want to continue to keep people safe from these games and whatnot. Just want to put my 2 cents out there. I'm going to continue this conversation on the playoffs. I know you already touched on this, but who can really stop Ohio State? I know you mentioned their O-line has been having injuries, which they have, and Texas's front line is really good themselves. But what does Texas have offensively that could, impose on Ohio State, even with their O-line issues?
Well, when Ohio State plays the way they have the last 2 games, the answer would be nobody. But we can't assume that they're going to be on fire. And again, there's something about matchups. And this is a matchup we have not seen. And I'm talking about matchups specifically along the offensive and defensive front.
That is true. And I can't comment too much because I'm not entirely sure how Ohio State has done, for example, against certain teams. But all I can say is, going back into their 2 losses, they had the 1-point loss to Oregon, and then they had their loss to Michigan when their offense was completely shut down. I still don't know even how to take those losses. Was it a scheme thing or I don't know. I don't know what you think about why it was. I'll tell you in a second what I think contributes to it, but what do you think even made them be a little inconsistent in that way?
Well, I just watched the Oregon game from earlier this season here in the last couple of days. So it's fresh in my mind, and I took a lot of notes. And their biggest issue in that game was that they couldn't run block. They pass protected fine, Will Howard made a couple mistakes. He wasn't as sharp in that game as he's been the last 2 weeks, but he played fine. He played a B game. The receivers played great. They caught everything. They were fine. The Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are going to be the same guys every week. They're two of the best running backs in the nation. They're two of the top 10. It was mostly offensive line not getting a running back push, a running game push, and Will Howard played good, but not great. And they still scored 31 points and had the ball. You know, if the game was 30 seconds longer, they would have either scored a field goal or a touchdown on that drive. So they could have scored 38 points in that game. And that's even with getting a ball taken out of their hands on a strip of Quinshon Judkins, having a missing one possession because a squib kick hit a front guy. So they didn't get a couple possessions, and they still scored 31 points and were on their way to 34 or 38 points. So I don't know what they didn't do against Oregon the first time. They weren't quite as sharp, but they put up like 460 yards of total offense. And again, close to 40 points if they would have had finished out the possession. So really the only 2 games this season, they haven't looked like, well, in the last 2 games, they have been the best offense in the country. During the course of this season, they have not been the best offense in the country, but they've been a top 10 offense in the country. They had a bad game against Nebraska. They had a bad game against Michigan, and Michigan has a great defensive front.
Right, and that's also the point too. Like their B game, even at their B game, I don't know who's gonna necessarily beat this Ohio State team as well. Even they'd have to really really have an offensive struggle like they did against Michigan, but like at the same time, Michigan fully stacked is like you mentioned a top 5 defense. So yeah, they'd have to play like some like C level. Like a C level game and whatnot, because again, we've seen Texas not just this game, but throughout the season, the offense just be pretty lackluster in that regard. And
well, it's not just the offense either, Muley. Consider this, and this just popped into my head. I don't know who the last team, and I'm not saying that Ohio State has either the best offense or the best defense in the country, but both are arguable. I don't know who the last team in college football was. Maybe it was 2018 Clemson that had the best offense in the country and the best defense in the country.
that's true, but as you mentioned, they have top 10 offense defense. So even if they're not at their A game, they're still a top 10. Let's say their offense gets tracked down a bit, top 15, top 20, whatever. What does like Penn State have, for example, besides Texas? What does Penn State have? Or let's say Georgia with Stockton. We don't know how they're going to look with Stockton at QB, but we know their receiving room has been subpar this year. We know their offense as a whole has not been the best. Their running back has dealt with injuries too. So, and their defense, while it's been a really good defense for Georgia as well, it hasn't been great. I'm not confident that they would beat this Notre Dame team even, actually. So,
yeah, I completely agree. Ohio State's playing the best. If they play their best, I don't think they're going to lose. If they play a B game against somebody, then maybe Georgia, maybe Notre Dame, maybe Texas beats them with an A effort. But they can lose. Obviously, they've already lost 2 games this year, so that they're not unbeatable. Let's certainly not tag them with being unbeatable, because they are certainly beatable.
right. And one thing I want to mention is we've mentioned this throughout the season as well, as while they are beatable for sure, but not to give excuses, but Ohio State, when you compared them to like the other the other like top teams in the Big Ten, they played a much harder schedule. Like they had to play all Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana. Look at those other three teams. How many of each other did they have to play? Like Penn State played Ohio State, but they didn't play Oregon until the championship game. Oregon played Ohio State too. Who, but then they didn't play Indiana. No, they didn't. And then yeah, again, Indiana, their American game was that. So a lot of these top teams, and I'm only bringing this up for like you don't have to talk about this right now, but how much does like the schedule make a difference? Because I think like let's take the SEC for example. Georgia played one of the toughest schedules in the country. Meanwhile, Texas and Tennessee played a comparatively weaker schedule in the SEC. Tennessee at least got the win over Bama, but other than that, who else did Tennessee beat? And yeah, those teams made the playoffs because me and two, we've been giving a lot of crap to Indiana and SMU, but it seems like there's been a theme of, with the schedule you're given and with college football, with the discrepancies between schedules where you don't even play half the teams anymore in your conference, that you can make the playoffs because due to that as well.
No, I think it's a great topic, and we're going to dive into it a little bit deeper as we get into the off season and try to come up with some kind of remedy for it. But I don't know we're not going to come up with a perfect remedy because that does not exist because the conferences are, as you are outlining, are too large. Therefore, it's incumbent on these conferences to do their very best to make these schedules as equitable as possible, but they cannot, of course, tell the future. They can only do that based on last season's results and anticipation, but they also are boxed into particular rivalries that have to be played and so forth, which for Indiana obviously only involves Purdue. So yeah, Indiana played a horrendous schedule. Indiana, to me, was the least impressive and played the least impressive 11-1 season in the history of college football. Now, not that I went through and accounted for every 11-1 season in college football history, but I can say that with a lot of confidence that they played the easiest and least productive 11-1 season in the history of college football. Now, 9/12 of that, 3/4 of that was not their fault, but they did fail to schedule anybody outside the conference. Once USC, I was on Twitter after USC beat Texas A&M because I saw some comments being made, and I thought, do I think that USC is better than Indiana? No, but I think they're roughly pretty close. And USC's out there playing Texas A&M, of course, in a bowl game, but also LSU and Notre Dame in non-conference play. What if Indiana would have played LSU and Notre Dame in non-conference play? Would we even be talking about Indiana? We would have just probably been patting them on the head saying you had a nice season. You went 9-3 or 10-2. Great job. You're going to the Rely Quest Bowl. Kurt Signetti did a hell of a job, but there would not be this playoff talk.
That's true. I think where people are gonna, the thing is like people look so closely at one game or one thing or whatever to where they're not gonna listen to that reasoning. They're not gonna realize that USC when they've played good teams that they've played up to those teams like they did with Penn State. They beat LSU early in the season, but what's going to be penciled in is the loss to Maryland. So I think you make a good point, but the thing is, I don't think anyone's going to take that seriously. I think it's a good point you made, but USC, they also played a very tough schedule. I think they played a top 10 schedule, if I'm not mistaken. They've been very up and down, but
well, my point is that there's something wrong with a sport where one team can go out and schedule FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte, and another team goes out and schedules Notre Dame and LSU. And we're supposed to like allow these two teams to play in the same conference and play in the same level of football?
Oh, most definitely. And I don't know. And again, why should teams continue to schedule a good out of conference? Like when the Alabama AD mentioned that everyone thought he was like just whining, and they brought up the losses were in the SEC, but we are aware that the losses were in the SEC and there was games we should have handled. But he was talking about that Bama has scheduled FSU, Notre Dame, and Ohio State going forward. If the thing is going forward that the losses will end up impacting you way more, given the discrepancies in strength of schedules, why schedule them? Why not do what Indiana did? Indiana realized that this season, as long as they win a lot of games, they can still make it. So they did the same thing for next season, and it doesn't matter. They'll still get rewarded for it because we have a lot of. It's not just the community either. It's a lot of fans that they get butthurt when their team doesn't do well. When their team does well but doesn't play this toughest schedule, and then they get mad and then they point fingers and say, well, SEC is not that good. They've been overrated and stuff. Or Big Ten, they only have these. It's only a top-heavy conference, which I'm not going to entirely say there's not discrepancies in the Big Ten, but there's a lot of quality teams and then an elite section of them too. And while SEC hasn't had the greatest postseason, a lot of these losses were to Big Ten teams too. So I don't know. I think I'm just rambling at this point. Maybe I need to get off.
Well, I don't think that there's an answer to your question, and this is why. We don't have an example this season of a team that would have made the playoff except they scheduled somebody difficult in non-conference play and lost. But that's going to happen. There's going to be a situation where, let's say instead of, and there's probably better examples than this one, that Alabama going 9-3, instead of their third loss being in conference, they would have lost to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was a 10-2 team. And the argument could be made, well, Alabama should have filled the gap, filled that scheduling spot with Middle Tennessee, beat them, finished 10-2 instead of going 9-3 with a loss out of conference. That didn't happen this year, but it will going forward. And yes, there's no answer, because a team like Indiana is going to get rewarded and acknowledged for playing an 11-1 season, especially in the Big Ten, and they will make the playoff, and they won't have to account for the 3 high school teams that they played in non-conference play or be penalized for that. So and USC's not going to nobody's going to pat USC on the back for going 7-6 because they scheduled LSU and Notre Dame outside the conference. And shoot, if USC would have been 3 games better, I know that's a big leap, but certainly nobody can have difficulty envisioning USC putting together a 9-3 season, and they would have lost to either Notre Dame or LSU, and that would have cost them the playoffs. Then they could be saying, why don't we schedule like Indiana? This isn't something that we should be arguing about. It's something that needs to be addressed. And the best way for me to suggest to address it is to take the scheduling out of the hands of the schools. But that's not going to happen until somebody has control of the sport.
Right. And also, even if you take the scheduling out of the schools, it's like you mentioned, how do you make a balanced schedule? You can only go off the results of last season, but we've seen so many teams this season have complete turnarounds, whether good or bad. Like, how many teams that were great last season, like Utah, Arizona, or whoever may be, Florida State, how many teams that they just end up being complete like they weren't just mediocre, they were bad teams.
You're
These
right.
were bad teams. Like, you can't, and then you take the Big 12, out of like the top 4 teams, I can't off the top of my head. I don't even know who played each other except for like in the regular season, except for Arizona State and BYU. That like it's ridiculous, and I think because SEC is like what 16 teams, but or whatnot. Like the Big 12 is like a massive conference, for example, and like I think that just shows like even when you add just a couple more teams, it makes the scheduling period even that much more difficult. And yeah. Anyways, I'll just go with my last question. How do you feel about Georgia Notre Dame? I don't know if you made a preview video yet. Who would you have in that?
No, I just had Bill Bender of the Sporting News on the other day, so we posted that video. But I'm trying to think. Then, of course, we've got a Notre Dame and Georgia channels where we've got content over there. My picks on Patreon, so I need to honor those folks that are members there and also as YouTube Premium members here. I think that it's going to be a slugfest. I think that the defenses are too good for the offenses. I think that, as a caller said a few minutes ago, and we've said all week, that the Georgia Tech game plan seems to be one that Notre Dame can use because of their quarterbacks being so similar. I'm extremely impressed with Notre Dame's defense, and I'm extremely impressed with their running back tandem of Price and Love. I think those guys are exceptional. They might have the best tandem in the country, and their combination of pass rush and secondary play was devastating against Indiana. Indiana scoring 43 points a game, and they basically scored 3 points against Notre Dame. Arian Smith, somebody needs to teach him how to catch a ball without jumping when he doesn't need to jump. He looks like a third grader out there. I don't know why he does that all the time. It's kind of strange. Even Kirk Herbstreit pointed that out. I was thinking the same thing. I've noticed it for the entire season. Here's a guy that's like one of the fastest players in college football, and like you throw a ball right between his two numbers and he like jumps. And he drops a lot of them. Going into the SEC championship game, Georgia had like 48 drops this season. So that went up considerably in that game.
For sure. Okay, well, that's all I had. I think that's pretty good. Just brief preview. Thank you, Mark.
Of course. Always appreciate the call. We'll talk some scheduling here in the off season.
For sure. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye. I do apologize for my voice, everyone. It is stripped bare. Ever since I did some traveling the other day, got quite scratchy, and it's just as dry as could be. So thanks for hanging in with me and putting up with the awful sound. Next up, we got Yakov on the line. Yakov, what's going on?
Mark, it's always great to speak to you. Thank you for having me.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mark. Happy New Year to you as well. Probably know I'm feeling pretty good right now. And by the way, thank you for reading my super chat. Actually, my dad texted me. He's watching your show, but you would never know. He doesn't comment or anything like that. But he made that comment to me. And, in comparison to John Stallworth, I don't remember much about John Stallworth, maybe the very end of his career. But my dad wanted me to say that to you. And he appreciated your short but very honest answer about that.
Yeah, John, for one thing, a wide receiver in the mid-70s, I'm sure the weight training program that those particular players were on overall, but especially as a wide receiver, just pale in comparison to what these guys go through now.
Yeah. He's probably benching 100 pounds and, doing a couple of dumbbells and things like that, but not the program we have nowadays.
Do you, but yeah, John Stallworth was a big, lanky, tall, big framed guy. Do you remember where John Stallworth went to college?
Mark, I think it was not a big program.
Exactly. Went to Alabama A&M.
Okay. Yeah, I about to say Alabama State or something. Yeah. Well, I don't remember, his college days, obviously, but I knew it was a small school.
Yeah, John Stallworth was a bit overshadowed, of course, by Lynn Swann, but man, he had some sterling Super Bowl moments as well. And a lot of people thought he should have been the MVP of the Steelers' final Super Bowl win. He had two tremendous long touchdowns in the fourth quarter against the Rams.
Right. Yes, I've I was something before I started watching football, but I definitely I've seen the highlights of that, and they're very similar in that they're both about the same height, long
Yep.
arms, and if he had if he had played in the modern era with the weights, they may have have a similar build. But obviously, in those days, again, he was probably doing very little as far as that goes.
And before somebody calls me on it about being inaccurate, yes, one of the two long receptions by Stallworth was not a touchdown, but I believe you could check me on a 75-yarder and a 47-yarder against the Rams. I can picture both of them. One of them turned out to be the cover shot on Sports Illustrated. It was just a beautiful shot, as it always was back in those days, of Stallworth with the ball going right over Rod Perry, the safety's head, right into his arms. As the Steelers were down by 2 points in the fourth quarter and came back and won.
Mark, this is not what I call, but this reminds me of a neighbor of mine. He my age, but so he wouldn't necessarily remember the Steelers that much. But he had probably the early '80s. He had this one football game where it was basically it was a field and it vibrated.
Oh,
and it
yes.
was you had that too.
Absolutely, it was called oh shoot. And they would put the Super Bowl, the previous year's Super Bowl teams. I had the Cowboys and the Broncos.
Okay. Well, he had the Steelers and the Rams. It was Super Bowl, I believe, 16,
Nice.
I think. They made it 15 or 16. And we used to play that all the time. And he always wanted to be the Steelers. I always wanted the Rams. There wasn't much strategy to that game, of course.
Does anybody out there remember the name of that game? And it was funny because at least I was fooled into thinking, that you lined them up and they actually would run routes and all this, but it was a total joke. You had a little foam football that you would press into the hand of the quarterback, but there was no way for it to pass to someone. And there was supposedly a way to pass it, but it was just if you whoever you hit, that was the person that was the pass receiver. But they would just the field would vibrate and the players would just kind of meander in circles. I don't know why I'm getting such a laugh out of this, but it just brings me back to being 8 years old.
Well, maybe I'll go around. Maybe one day I'll see it at a garage sale or something like that. If I ever do, I'll pick that thing up.
Yeah.
Well, that was Mark. So first of all, I enjoyed. As we both know, we always love going down memory lane and things like that. Mark, now obviously because of what happened in New Orleans last night, it put a damper on things overall and as far as sports go. So I'm going to put that aside to make the following. So that's the most important thing. But I'm going to make a less important comment in that this was. I loved January 1st growing up in the 80s and the 90s. I think this was, if we had the night game tonight, I think it would have been the most similar to what I remember growing up the January 1st to be as since the playoff era started for sure, and maybe even since sometime in the BCS. The Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl. I know there was some kind of combination where they were playing some of those some of those games were played in the second. But do you happen to feel today any nostalgia for what January 1st used to mean to you, in the 80s and 90s?
No.
You didn't? Okay.
No, the schedule is taking us further and further away from that.
Okay. Well,
I think we only had two. Well, actually, the first game was the Peach Bowl. So we only had one traditional New Year's Day bowl game on today.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I think what I meant to say by that, but you're right as far as that goes. I guess I meant to say, Mark, and growing up, I always thought of the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Orange Bowl, and maybe the Fiesta Bowl, depending on who's playing there, as kind of individual championship games of great significance, even if you weren't the national champion from that game. And then, that hasn't been the case for many years, that type of feeling. And all these games, of course, the winner goes on, so it is different as far as that goes. I just meant to say that the significance of each game was great compared to similar as it was in those days. Not the actual name of the bowl games or anything like that.
Yeah. So first of all, back when I was growing, so if you take it any time from when I first watched football up through, I would say this held until the early 90s, because then TV got a little smarter and realized, okay, we can move the Fiesta Bowl to the night of the second and do some different things. But for the entirety of the 80s, it was basically that you had the Cotton Bowl would kick off at noon, and the Fiesta Bowl would kick off about 1. And the Cotton Bowl was on CBS. The Fiesta Bowl was at 1 p.m. Eastern on NBC. And then the Rose Bowl was after the Fiesta Bowl at 5. And then you had the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl. The Orange would follow the Rose on NBC.
Yes.
And the Sugar would be on ABC. And they would roughly both kick off about 8 p.m. And that was your lineup.
Yeah, Mark, I remember, until we had a remote control that I used to, every January we used to spend at my grandparents' house every New Year's. And my grandmother, I was like the human remote between the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl. And I'd get up and we'd go back and forth. And it was hard to believe that, they would have such great games on at the same time. But I guess in those days, no one ever, thought, hey, maybe we should do something different.
Well, and I thought it was amazing. I loved when, ESPN kicked in with some games, and around 1988, 89, think about that Ohio State Auburn game in the Hall of Fame Bowl. The Hall of Fame Bowl jumped into New Year's Day right around that time, 86, 87, and they would start at 11 a.m., which of course was the pre-runner of the Outback Bowl that was the Hall of Fame Bowl. The Hall of Fame turned into the Outback Bowl. So then you had an 11 a.m., and then the Citrus Bowl jumped in the early 90s as well. I would think that the first Citrus Bowl, I remember Ohio State and Georgia played in 92. That was a New Year's Day game that you'd have those Citrus Bowl games on ABC. So ABC did not have a game early in the day until the Citrus Bowl. They moved the Citrus Bowl into that time slot.
Yeah. Well, wow. That's that's great memories there, Mark. You have a great memory of that. Mark, I want to say something, but the last thing I'm going to say here, Mark, but I'm going to temper it by saying that the NFL, the regular season is the most watched thing on TV. I think in the last 4 years, the only things that anyone's watched more is the presidential. I'm not talking political here, but just for the presidential debates, election night coverage, and maybe the VP debate. Other than that, the NFL is by far the most watched thing. Regular season, I'm talking about, of all the networks. So I mean to say that the regular season is a great thing. However, in the NFL, let's say you're in the NFC East and you're the Giants, and you lose 7 games. You have a bad record against the Redskins, against the Eagles. You lose one or both of those games, or against the Cowboys or so, and you make it to the conference finals and they're not, or certainly if you win the Super Bowl and they're not. The fact that you had a bad record against your division rivals and you only maybe won a wild card and still made it to the Super Bowl, or at least at this point, right, what I'm talking about as far as Ohio State goes, you're in the AFC and NFC championship game. How you did against your rivals is irrelevant. Mark, I'm going to say something. I'm going to try to temper it by saying now in this 12-team playoff era, if Ohio, I know I'm going to sound like some kind of dismissing something, but if Ohio State lost to Michigan this year, when they lost to Michigan, but now they're in the equivalent of the conference championship game, and how much more so if they win the title? Is it blasphemous for me to say that losing to Michigan is irrelevant?
Well, Yakov, I don't know at what point you joined the live stream tonight, but I said something similar probably within the first 5 minutes. And I said it this way.
I came a little later than that. But yeah.
I in no way want to discount that rivalry. I still believe it's the most important and the most cherished, and it's the most bitter, and it's all the most that you want to put on it, the most important and all of that business and the best. But yeah, for the first time, and I would have told you, oh my goodness, I would have told you at any point in my life, if you would have grabbed the 15-year-old Mark and said, Ohio State's going to win a national championship this year, but lose to Michigan, or you can go 8-3 and beat Michigan, I wouldn't even think 3 seconds about it. I beat Michigan, go 8-3, fine. But I'm watching this game today, and I think I also had the same thought against Tennessee. But now a road to a national championship is becoming even more possible and probable to a certain extent. And I'm thinking this is starting, and just think we haven't even completed the second round of this playoff. We still have another round, and then we've got a championship game. It does feel like the NFL playoffs. And we had Minnesota Dave on here, and I said, for as much as you hate the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears, would you not want the Minnesota Vikings to win the Super Bowl? And if you had to lose to the Packers, get swept by the Packers? How many times have we seen a team lose a big in-division rivalry, a Steelers-Ravens game late in the season, but then they went on a run in the playoffs and won? And it's more and more having that feel to it. That Michigan game seems like it was a year ago.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. And same in the NFL, if you won both the regular season games against that team 100-0, both of them 100-0, and they win the Super Bowl, I don't know why in the offseason you would think that we're 5% Super Bowl champs or something like that. It would be irrelevant. The Miami Dolphins beat go back 40 years, but the first I was allowed to watch the first half of that Miami Chicago Bears game in 1985.
Yep.
So the first year I was allowed to watch the first half of Monday night games. And I don't consider them to be 5% Super Bowl 1985 Super Bowl champs. That's just one game, but yeah, I guess I'm just trying to say, Mark, that if you won the Super Bowl, you lost 7 games that year, you were the wild card game, or you were 15-1. Maybe as far as if you're ranking all-time great teams, that would matter. But if you lost 7 games or lost 1 game, you won the Super Bowl. It's irrelevant. And like you said here, if you lost 2 games, and if Clemson had won the championship there and lost 3 games, I wouldn't devalue they lost 3 games this year. I wouldn't devalue their championship. It'd be irrelevant they lost 3 games. You could lose 3 conference games perhaps and lose 1 division or 1 Big Ten game. Be coming with 4. Maybe the format will eventually change, but in theory, you could lose 4 games, make the playoffs, win it, and you might be able to say it's irrelevant that you lost 4 games. So
I thought you're bringing memories to mind of arguments I had with people just a couple of years ago.
About the NFL or about college?
No, about college. Before the 12 team was announced, I remember having arguments with people when we were talking about having an 8-team playoff that were saying it's ridiculous to consider that the 8th best team in the country, the number 8 team in the country, could then go on and win a national championship. They would totally not deserve that. And my thought was, first of all, if you're the 8th best team in the country, you're 10-2. So that's not that awful. But at that, the mindset of most fans just a few years ago was, that's not a good record. That is not a good enough record. But then my thought was, if you're the number 8 team in the country, if it would have played out with an 8-team format, you have to beat the number 1 team in the country. Then you have to beat the number 4 team in the country, and then the number 2 team in the country. If chalk holds, you will have earned a national championship. If you beat the top 4 teams in the country after going 10-2, and this is very much like that. Yes, if Clemson would have won the national championship and beaten Texas, Arizona State, Ohio State, and Georgia,
right?
Yeah, it's a different world.
Yeah,
and I certainly, for any Michigan fan out there that wants to brag and boast about beating Ohio State this year, they certainly have that right and can live in that mindset as well. I have no issue with that and say, you know what? We still won what is the best rivalry in sports, and we've won 4 years in a row. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's room for that. I think that might start to change as the playoff era goes on, that it'll be more NFL-ish. And the reason I also, Mark, I wanted to make sure that nobody thinks that somehow, I'm not going to pay attention to the Mark Rogers show until the playoffs, because, as we see in the NFL, despite the fact that's definitely true, the case there, it's irrelevant who you beat or lost, who you won or lost against in the playoffs or in the regular season. There's still a great, interest, great ratings. So those people should not they should certainly tune in to Mark Rogers' Voice of College Football for the regular season. It's not devalued. It's just I just think now it's just one of 12 games. The formula might be, hey, you're in the Big Ten, you're SEC, you got to win 10 games, and then you go from there. It doesn't matter even which 10 necessarily. You got to win 10 games. You're in the playoffs. Maybe you have to win less, depending on which ones. But yeah, Mark, I think I made the point here. And again, the Ohio State's. Mark, this is the last thing I want to say. Do you think we could say this? I forgot I wanted to say this. The team that wins the championship this year, I think we could say that they had the most accomplished season in the history of college football.
Well,
they're not necessarily the best team. They're not better than 95 Nebraska Cornhuskers necessarily, but I think they've accomplished more than any team has in the history of college football.
Well,
can I make that last point?
Get your point.
Yeah.
I would say it this way. I think they've all accomplished the same. They won a national championship, but they had to go down the toughest road.
Okay, right. They had to do more to win it than any other team has.
Yes.
Okay. Mark, I'm going to listen to the rest of the show.
Thanks, Yakov.
Thank you, Mark.
Good night.
Bye.
Disputed National Champions. Check out the book. The link's in the description section of the video. You love college football. I got to say, you're a college football junkie if you're watching us, and you're going to love this book. I'll just flat out say it. You're going to love this book. It's $9.99, and the link's in the description section. I won't go into a big diatribe about what it's about, but you'll love it. All right, Adam, thank you so much for the super chat. Mark, on this show, you should acknowledge that the team ranked second nationally in total defense, and that was on fire at the end of the season after beating Ole Miss, should have been in Florida. Oh. Florida should not have been in the playoffs. So I will not acknowledge that just because you're number 2 in the nation in defense. I don't think Florida's number 2 in defense. So Adam, I would have to say I don't really understand your point. I guess I'm not reading it properly. Mark, on this show, you should acknowledge that the team ranked second nationally in total defense. I don't know who that is. I'd have to look it up. And that was on fire at the end of the season after beating Ole Miss, should be in. Okay, Florida. Got it. No, they shouldn't be in. They went 7-5. They shouldn't be in a playoff. No. Just because they beat Ole Miss? Ole Miss didn't deserve to be in the playoff. Why would they? No. Florida should not be in the playoff. Yeah. And really, Florida's number 2 in the nation in total defense? Really? Okay. All right. And then we also have, and shoot, I had a point to make and now it's totally left me. Ty, thank you so much for this. Ohio State, a 6.5 point favorite against Texas. Thoughts on that, Mark? It's too high. That's my thought. Vegas is being swayed by this last result. That's for sure. I expect that to come down. That's going to come down. Never respond or react to the previous result too much. That's why week 2 results in the NFL are highly questionable, or there's a lot of money lost on week 2 results in the NFL. All right. Looks like we got 3 callers lined up here. Rob, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I'm not going to be on too long, but I just wanted to congratulate you. The championship is Ohio State's to lose at this point. There is no team in the playoffs right now that can play at that level and beat Ohio State. Literally no team. And I'm not saying that Ohio State's going to win, but what I'm saying is at their ceiling, and I'm always a ceiling guy, you know that, I've talked to you about that before, but their ceiling is just higher than anybody else's ceiling. I mean, that's clear. We've talked, or people have talked, pundits have talked, we've probably talked this year about how there's not like that one team that just looks unbeatable, unstoppable. Well, Ohio State just turned into that team the last 2 games. Pretty impressive stuff. It's very troubling if you're another team in the playoffs and you're looking at that and you're like, oh, well, that's a little scary. So Yeah, it was a heck of a performance. I actually thought Ohio State was going to win, and I did think that they would bring the wood. I just didn't think it was going to look like that. I thought they'd win by like, 7 to maybe 14 points, somewhere around there. I didn't expect, the blowout, and the game was not as close as that score made it look. I mean, yeah, that was impressive.
Yeah, so I've thought Ohio State was the best team in the country. As I've said a million times during the course of this season, they haven't always played like it. I have to say that although I picked them to win this game, after I watched the first game, I wrote down all sorts of notes and reasons why either one of these teams would play better or worse, or reasons why they didn't accomplish something in the first game, or what has changed since the first game. And I thought there was a longer list of items on the Oregon side in their favor than the Ohio State side.
Oregon played the most controlled and most consistent football of any team this year.
Yeah.
That's not really disputable. That's pretty much, this like indisputable evidence, like throughout the season. They just they had like more game control than pretty much anyone. They had a rough game against Wisconsin, but everybody had a bad game this year. If your worst game of the year is a bit of a struggle bus game where you still win against a decent Big Ten team, that's not too bad. But yeah, Ohio State, they just kind of felt like to me that they were sleepwalking through the season, and I kept waiting. I'm like, man, when is this Ohio State team, with this, obviously much talked about, much ballyhooed roster value, $20 million plus roster. We all knew they had the talent. We all knew they had the players and the ability. But I was just waiting. I'm like, man, when are they going to really ascend to that next level? Because I knew they had it in them. And you kind of saw flashes of it here and there against Oregon the first game. The way they handled Indiana. There was flashes of that potential there, but they never really showed it until that Tennessee game, I feel. And then they've just taken it since then and just run with it. So I have no doubt in my mind. And of course, Texas could win. Like, they could win, but I don't have a doubt in my mind that Ohio State's going to the championship. Now, who they face and how they play in that game, that's debatable. But I really think it's a almost lock, right? Ohio State, though, they need to not feel the same way I do. They need to not look past Texas, because Texas does have a good defense, even though they haven't played all that great the last couple games. Their red zone defense was great against Arizona State, but not their 20-20. And hey, props. That's another thing I wanted to talk about. Props to Arizona State. They played a heck of a game, and Cam Scatteraboo is a beast. I love that guy. And for him to win the MVP of that game, despite being on the losing side, just tells you what kind of performance he had today. So that was a lot of fun to watch.
I can't argue with any of that. Ohio State's got two very difficult games ahead of it, or I guess I should just say one difficult game ahead of it. But yeah, they have the best team if they're playing the best, but the best team doesn't always win. And so they're going to be playing in Dallas. I don't know what kind of impact that's going to have on the game. I don't think much. But yeah, I still have reservations about pass blocking, even though it's been exceptional, because matchups change from game to game.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that's very powerful, and I talked about this when it happened. I think I called in after that Ohio State lost to Michigan, and I said, this is their Northern Illinois moment, even though it's not nearly as bad a loss, obviously, as Northern Illinois. But my point was, look at what Notre Dame did after that game. Right, they just went on a spree of just bashing and destroying people. For the most part, they had a couple of games that were not completely dominant, but they pretty much dominated from the rest of that point. And Ohio State has done that and then some. Like, the way they're not just demolishing middle of the road teams here. They're taking playoff teams and taking them to the woodshed. So this was the Michigan loss in a lot of ways was the best thing that could have ever happened to Ohio State, in my opinion.
Apparently. Maybe if Ohio State would have made 2 field goals and beat Michigan, maybe they'd be sitting at home right now. I don't know. Or maybe they would have kicked 2 field goals, beat Michigan 16-13, and they'd be exactly where they are right now. No one will know.
Didn't you feel that way, though, Mark? Like, didn't you feel that Ohio State was just I don't want to. It's not fair to say sleepwalking because I know the players were playing hard and stuff, but it just felt like something they just weren't clicking this year until, like I said, they had a couple of games where they were, but it just felt to me like they were. I don't know. They just weren't quite there, and I feel like they're obviously quite there now.
Well, I think if you go through the history of the 14 playoff, the playoff has been a magnifier. So certainly all the blowouts that we've seen in playoff games would not have been blowouts during the regular season. There would not have been, 11-1 teams blowing out other 11-1 teams by a significant margin because it just didn't happen during the regular season between that caliber of team. But the playoff tends to magnify the talent and separate the teams.
Right. Well, look, I've been having a great time with the playoffs, despite what some people, I know a lot of people complain about the scores and this and that. But look, I mean, the seeding, first of all, needs to change because, well, I mean, Texas didn't show it. I still, Texas to me, they struggled against the lowest ranked team in the playoffs. They struggled against ASU, not to take anything away from Clemson and Arizona State, but I just don't have a lot of faith in Texas. And hey, maybe I'll be eating the ultimate crow and maybe they beat Ohio State and I'm looking like an idiot, but I just don't see them winning that game. The last thing I wanted to
I was just going to say, not to cut you off, Rob, what you just stated about the two opponents for Ohio State and Texas makes a whole lot of sense in that going into this playoff, now certainly people don't have much respect for Tennessee right now because of what Ohio State did to them, but nobody was questioning Tennessee's credentials going into the playoff, and a lot of people thought that they were going to beat Ohio State, and obviously Ohio State laid waste to them. And as you just mentioned a second ago, Oregon's been the most consistently elite team in the country the whole season, and Ohio State laid waste to them versus what Texas did against the Clemson team that beat no one the entire season outside of SMU. And then this game against Arizona State today, in which they were extremely fortunate to win. Right. Ohio State's playing better football than Texas. It's not too close.
Yeah, it's not debatable. So, well, we'll see how it actually plays out when they meet. So, I'm not I'm not one of these people that just is a hypothetical game person. Thankfully we get to see these games played out, but yeah, my last point real quick goes out to the families and the victims of that New Orleans tragedy. Just praying for the families. And I don't even really want to talk about Notre Dame or Georgia right now just because it feels like almost like a slap in the face to the victims. So anyways, Mark, I hope you have a great New Year. I'm going to let you go. I know you got a couple other callers on the line. So hopefully, maybe we'll see some kind of interesting matchup in the championship. But like I said, I'm not going to talk about Notre Dame. So
thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, it's sad to think that there are people just like you, just like myself, that everything was probably generally fine in their lives 24 hours ago, and they're no longer with us. They're gone, or their family or loved ones, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters, parents, all those sorts of connections and relationships that, just imagine somebody in your life and they're the next day gone. And some of these comments and statements that I saw made about the relationship with some of these victims, I just can't imagine making those statements. I can't imagine being able to have the wherewithal to make any type of statement about any of my loved ones a few hours after experiencing their loss. I couldn't do it. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got Christopher on the line. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
How was your New Year's Eve?
My New Year's Eve was spent right here. It was fine.
That was a rhetorical question. I don't want to get anybody upset. I get mad though, Mark. How do I want to put this without offending anybody?
What are you mad about tonight, Chris? I don't want you to be mad.
Well, I'm not mad. I just, hats off to Ohio State. They did what I didn't think they could do. Actually, I didn't think they could beat Oregon. I'm not one to, you can think whatever you want to about me and say, well, Chris, I don't know what I was trying to do or whatever, but how I think somebody actually called you asked you this, and I think was it Michael? I don't remember. How easy is it to beat a team twice in a year? I mean, I don't know that it really matters to me, but is it a frequent thing or is it infrequent?
It's funny you bring that up, because if you don't mind me answering that
Well,
question, I can't answer the question, although I do remember posting a video maybe about 3 to 4 years ago where I went through all the probably post 1980 times in which two college football teams played twice in one season. Obviously, the most frequent one of those has been during conference championship games. So since we now have conference championship games since 1992, that's been the reason why teams have played twice in a season. Prior to that, you may recall that Nebraska and Oklahoma in 1978
they played in a bowl game.
Played in a bowl game after they played at the end of the regular season, which is very odd.
By the way, I'm okay.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I'm okay with that sort of thing. That doesn't really bother me at all, actually. I mean, it might upset some people. Well, they played, we don't want to see that again. I see that was a complaint with BCS one year. LSU played Alabama.
Yes.
I wasn't my favorite. That wasn't what I wanted to see happen. I was just like, who I actually wanted to see, and I don't want to get too far off topic. Had Houston been able to beat Southern Mississippi, I really thought, you can laugh and say whatever you want to about it, but I wanted 2 undefeated teams in the title game, and I think that's the way it should be, Mark.
So, Chris, if my throat wasn't so sore and raw,
well, you'd be screaming right now.
I was going to laugh. I would have done my best to give you a mock laugh.
Okay.
Because yes, Houston did not belong in the championship game. Is that the Houston team that Kevin Sumlin, and they beat Penn State in the Ticket City Bowl?
Beat them pretty good. Didn't just beat them. I mean,
yeah, they beat a 9-4 Penn State team.
I don't even know if they were that good. I think they're like 7-5, but they beat them.
Yeah, they did.
I don't know if they were 9-4. Were they that good? Maybe they were. I didn't think they were that
I
good.
think they were 9-3, and then they lost to Houston.
Okay.
But that's funny that you bring up Houston, just because that game had kind of left my memory, and that team.
I'm not just blowing smoke, Mark. I don't, for anybody, and I've never done it either, in all fairness, but I don't think people understand how hard it is to win every game. You can say, oh, well, Liberty did it because they're in an easy conference, and you put anybody in there, they do the same thing. I don't think that, why that's such a stupid argument? It isn't just any other team, I think it's just as hard for Liberty to win 13 games as it would be for, they're playing an easier, I know that. I'm not so stupid I can't figure that out, but it doesn't mean it's easier for them to win every game. I don't think it's any easier for them to win. And I don't think it's easier at all. And I know they got beat real bad by Oregon, and I know, that proved that they had no business even being wherever or whatever. But, to get there, and that's another thing. And I know they aren't as good this year, but they're still decent. I don't understand the thinking behind it has to be the very best teams every single season. We can't let anybody in that might do something different. Don't ever do anything different. We don't want to do that.
So should we just arbitrarily grab Northwestern 4-8 and I don't know, Vandy 6-6 this year and have them play in the national championship game?
Well, no, come on, Mark, cut me a little slack.
Well, I don't know your point when you say why do we always have to have the best teams competing? Well, that's because that's what it's all about.
Part of the reason Houston wasn't undefeated was because they lost their coach. I don't really know what goes into every game. I mean, I'm not around it. I can tell you that Southern Mississippi, I think, owned Houston. I think it wasn't just some strike of luck that they managed to beat Houston in the championship game. I think they were good good team, by the way.
Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can guarantee that 93% of our audience has no idea what you're talking about. And probably,
I just got done listening to about 6 people that didn't have a damn clue about what, and I had to listen to it for like 25 minutes. And now you're telling me, I mean, these are people that it's like, why are they even bothering you? It's like stuff that I could get just like by talking to my pet dog,
Well, Chris, you got to realize we're sitting here on the first day of 2025, and you're bringing up an obscure situation from 2011 in Conference USA.
You know how good Southern Mississippi was that year? They were outstanding.
They were
And,
one of the 50 best teams in the country.
well, they were outstanding, and their coach went on to coach North Carolina, Larry Fedora. And
Yes.
I don't know, maybe he wasn't the greatest coach they ever had. I can maybe
No,
admit to
he
that.
wasn't.
Well, okay, that's fine. But, for Houston not to be considered is not fair. I mean, I don't know what else you want to say about it.
They
Like I say,
lost. They played a crappy schedule and they lost. So
well, no, they were beaten. They were beaten.
what's our point here? What are we getting at, Chris?
The people were upset because they didn't want to see LSU play Alabama for 2. And I don't know that I wanted to see it happen either. But it was the lesser of two evils. The only other choice that I could see that made sense to me would have been putting Houston in there. And I don't know that Houston couldn't have beat LSU. Oh no, they wouldn't have beat LSU. They would have got beat. Well, how does anybody even know that? They don't know that.
Hey, Chris, let me interject with this. From the time that we watched the national championship game this year up until the end of August, we are going to have 0 college football, none. And you can call me every.
Nobody's told me that, and they never followed through. Mark, I've been on here 5 minutes. I just listened to 35 minutes of crap.
No. Hang on, will you let me finish my statement, please, Chris?
Sure.
From the end of the national championship game this season on January 20th up until I think the date is August 30th, we will have 0 college football. And you can call me every time I do a show. Let me finish my statement, please, Chris.
If I can get through without DarealMVP being on for 55 minutes.
Please let me finish my statement. My statement is, for the entire off season, you can call me every time I'm on, and I will politely and patiently listen, and I will have and it will not be work for me to do this. I will have fun talking to you about 1984 or 2011 or 1957. I will, all of that. But we are in the midst of a college football playoff in 2024-25, and that's what we need to talk about right now. I was about
to do that, but you won't. See, again, you're not going to let me. You're going to say, can I?
I am going to let you, but you weren't talking about 2024-25. You were talking about 2011 in Conference USA.
I was trying to make a point, but I guess
okay.
Made his
proceed.
And I'm not going to talk about that now because that's not really why I was calling. Anyway, but it was a good Southern Mississippi team that beat Houston, but that's kind of out of the point. Who cares? I think they played Nevada, and by the way, Nevada had a good team. But anyway, that doesn't matter. That's been years ago. Anyway, and I can't remember. I think Nevada lost his. So I don't remember. It was anyway. You're right. It doesn't matter to this season. The one thing I was going to say, and it's just a point. It's not to diminish what Ohio State's been able to do, but kind of what I think it means is. Really, they won the Big Ten title today, is what I think it means. Now, we don't have to look at it quite to that extent, but the other thing I want to say, because I'm not completely stupid, Mark, and somebody just called and told you that it's like the NFL now, and it's like it isn't anything like the NFL. There's not even any remote comparison between the two. And oh no, the game between Michigan doesn't matter. Okay, well that's good to know. I guess I did. Wasn't really my conclusion, but anyway, kind of what I was thinking was what Michigan showed was that they still are pretty damn good, is what I was thinking they were showing by beating Alabama. But anyway, the point I was actually going to try to make was that with this new format, which isn't really something I particularly like because it extends the season out. This should be the end of it right now. And it's not because I don't like football. It's because it's time for to teach. It's even in the Bible to there's a season, turn, whatever, the song or whatever. I mean, we could play football all year round, I guess, and never have enough of it. But I don't know that these players want to play. You were asking why were there blowouts? I have a pretty good idea why there might have been blowouts. Just because you have a playoff and just because you include some of these teams, that doesn't mean those teams necessarily want to play in those playoffs. I mean, you can maybe ask them and maybe they'll say that they do. But my guess would be after they play 12 or 13 games, they might be looking to do something else. I mean, if I was like 20 years old, I don't know that I would necessarily want to play, that it wouldn't necessarily be my first choice is to play 5 or 6 more games. Maybe I'm alone that way. I played when I was in middle school. We played about 5 or 6 games and that was the end of the year. And the reason it was the end of the year was it was time to do something different, and I really don't think that having, we can say it's great, if it is great, maybe I'm wrong, but, the way I look at it is Ohio State just beat Oregon and they deserve every credit for doing it. There shouldn't be any question about how they did it, but it doesn't erase the first loss and it doesn't really erase the second loss. And the other thing I want to say about it, if it was really fair, then BYU should be still alive. They only lost 2 games. Why aren't they in? Why are they out? You know, and you can say it's because of schedule, but I don't really know if that's true or not. They beat a decent Colorado team, not a great Colorado team. I don't think Colorado was all that great. Beat them pretty commandingly. Why is BYU not considered? You know, well, because they weren't invited. Okay, well, I guess that's really fair now, isn't it, Mark? One's invited, one isn't. That makes it fair that one can go and one can't. You know, and I know there's going to be a push to include more teams and all that, but I just don't think that, I don't know that that's really what they want. You know, I'm not a college kid. I know I don't really represent them, but this isn't the NFL. And if they're trying to make it like the NFL, that's the wrong thing to do, in my opinion. They're saying that guy just said something about 7 losses and winning into Super Bowl. Well, you know what a Super Bowl is? It's like, that's the fake title. That's the lie. So you win the last game of the year, that means you're the world champions. According to who? Who made that decision? No, who made that decision?
What?
Who made that decision?
You are now discrediting the Super Bowl.
If you win one game, okay, why not play the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year? Put the 2 best teams, you know, it doesn't make sense to me. It's like, so at the end of the year, the last game of the year decides who wins the whole thing, and nobody's ever going to question it. No, don't ever do that. Doesn't matter that the team finished 9-7 and was maybe even 6-9. They won the one game that matters. Okay, everything's about one game, I guess. In what universe is it like that? In what universe? I must be living in an alternative universe where one game determines everything, even if you're 0-15. If you can win the one game at the end of the year, go 1-15. If it's the best team, you're the world champions.
Chris, you know more about the NFL than that. You know better than that nobody's advancing in the NFL playoffs by being 0-15. You have to earn a playoff spot.
Well, I understand that, and I think only like 12 teams go, right? Am I wrong about that, or do they make it more?
We're up to 14 now.
Okay, well, it'll be 16 eventually because they're not going to stop at 12, and they're not going to stop.
And why would that be?
Well, I understand you want to
Maybe you've learned something from me in our discussions, and I just mentioned this to you the last time you called. Why would that be? Would the NFL would expand their playoffs?
They can do whatever they want as far as
why, but why would they do that?
Well, more people would be probably interested, my guess would be, and then maybe there's more incentive to it besides just that. Maybe that's where it. Maybe for the NFL, maybe for professional football, maybe that's where but this isn't professional football.
Money.
Well, so we're losing something with all of this, and I'm not exactly sure what it is, Mark. But so let's say Ohio State wins, they're going to be what? Beat Texas probably, and then maybe beat, I don't know, Georgia, I guess. Okay, they're going to be, like somebody just said, they're going to be the best team they ever played, I guess, because they beat 2 teams that are pretty good. That's really, I mean, so what? You know, they also lost to 2 teams that weren't that good. So, you know, where do you draw the line? It's kind of the way I look at it. You know, I mean,
you just said Michigan was pretty damn good, to quote you.
No, I'm not. I'm just
and now you're saying they're no good. And Oregon was the only undefeated team in the country, and now you're saying they're no good.
Well, I don't know that they're no good. I just no good compared to what we say that Ohio State must be so much better. And there's one final thing I want to say. If you were really a true fan, you'd be promoting Kent State. You know, and I hate to have to dig so low to kind of bury you, but you know, I want to hear a little bit about how Kent State's such a great place. That's where you went to school. So if you're really true and loyal, I don't think you'd have to rely on Ohio State to boost yourself up.
I'm not relying on anybody. I cover college football.
If you were true to your alma mater, you'd be trying to get Kent State somewhere instead of
Chris. You know what I mean? If Ohio State was, if they were Purdue, if they had just gone 1-11, I would not be talking about Ohio. I talk about the teams that are relevant and that people want to talk about because they win games and compete for championships. That's why we talk about Ohio State, just like we talk about Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, etc. Fill in the blank.
DarealMVP's he's like the greatest fan ever for every team that's doing really good. I mean, he ought to be like the Kansas City Chiefs, like general manager. You know, it's like, I guess it's okay to do that. I guess there's nothing really wrong with it, but I'm sure if Kentucky starts to turn it around, he'll be their #1 fan too. I mean, I guess you can look at it any number of ways.
This is my promotion of Kent State right now.
No.
There they are. I'm going to produce a Kent State video this week. How many people do you think are going to watch that?
You're missing the point. I went to Colorado State. Nobody cares about Colorado State. And I don't know that I really care about Colorado State that much. And I didn't play for Colorado State. And I think the last time I looked at them, they were number 75, according to what I ranked teams at. That's probably not very good. occasionally Colorado State's pretty good, but I'm not going to just, when they're really good, all of a sudden come out and say, boy, isn't that great? Colorado will be like the real MVP, isn't it? So, Mark, aren't you sure that Colorado State, they might be the best team ever play, because they just won every game, It's like, a little bit of that goes a long way, and it's like, he's not wrong, but it's like, he should be doing that when they're not good too, He should be saying how good Kentucky is when they suck, because they do suck. So I just kind of get tired of some of the stuff people call in to talk about, because it's like it's bandwagon stuff, and it's Boise State. It looked to me like they played a little bit better, just a little bit better. I think they might have beaten Penn State. Now nobody else is going to agree with that. Oh no, they got beat 33-2.
I agree with you.
Well, but I don't know that it really matters. It's just that
Did you miss my statement there, Chris? I agree with you. I said that last night. I thought I was extremely impressed with Boise State.
There was actually one other thing I was going to ask you about, if you don't mind. Baylor
Sure.
against LSU. This guy made this acrobatic. I mean, I've never seen such an acrobatic. I mean, it was like one I think should be like in a highlight reel. Anyway, he made this acrobatic catch. Okay, 1 foot down. Official took it away, and for no other reason, just the fact, I guess, that he could, and I'm not convinced he didn't do it, because, I mean, I'm not one to really believe that there's partisanship. I don't know if it was SEC officials or not, maybe not in that game, but
No.
I don't think you should be able to take a touchdown away that's been called good, that replay can't overturn, but because I guess the replay official can exert his authority, and I don't know if it decided the game or not. I think Baylor lost by 2 scores, but he scored a touchdown, and there really wasn't any doubt that he scored. Oh, it looked like maybe part of the cleat, maybe touched out of bounds, maybe. To me, that's not, you don't have that decision to make those decisions, to where, to me, it was like the worst call. You ought to look at that and see if you agree with me on that one.
I don't know anything about that, but I'll look it up.
Well, no, it was an amazing catch. It wasn't just a great catch. It was like he even looked as he was catching it to make sure that part of his foot, that he didn't go out of bounds, and they took it off like it didn't count, and it's like, oh, well, I guess you can do that. I guess an official can change the outcome of a game if he doesn't like the other team. That's about the only thing I can think of that might have been the reason. And I don't know that Baylor would have beaten LSU, but it's like the idea that they can do that, though, it just really bothered me. You should see the play and just decide if you think you agree that it was a bad call. And if you don't agree, that's fine. You don't have to agree with me. But, they said part of his foot landed out of bounds. Well, it really didn't. What it was he caught it, the foot was in bounds. Then as he went to fall to the ground, after he already caught it and they called it a touchdown, then at that point, yeah, his foot fell out of bounds. Well, why wouldn't it at that point? To me, I don't get why I don't think they should be able to do that. I think that replay official should be fired. But, no, nobody else thinks so. So it was a great catch. I mean, it was like better than any catch I think I've ever seen an NFL player make. It was really that good. It was amazing.
I will give it a look.
All right. Sorry to
did
bother
not
you,
see
Mark.
that.
I am a little upset, but
Well, you're not bothering me, Chris. I'm taking calls. That's why I'm here. I feel bad that you're not that you're mad about certain things.
Well, I just think they should treat everybody the same. BYU, they don't get to go. Is their record that much worse? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't make these decisions, but I'm not saying they would have. They probably would lose, but just because they probably would doesn't mean they necessarily will.
You're right. BYU had the same record as Ohio State and Tennessee. And anybody else? I guess those would be the 2 teams that went 10-2.
Well, and they play in a good conference. I mean, at some point, and then there was one other thing. You keep railing on Indiana like they're playing like these nobodies. I guess Ohio State, when they play, who was it? Akron? Oh, I'm sure they had to pull out they played Akron. Oh, and they played Marshall too. And then, and Western, they really scheduled some tough teams out of conference there, Mark. Western.
Yeah. This shows that you are not listening to me.
They also scheduled Western Michigan. So
I know who Ohio State played. I know who basically every team in the country played. You didn't listen to my explanation. You obviously, I have never in any way said that Ohio State played a good non-conference schedule this year. They played a horrendous non-conference schedule, but there's a few other mitigating factors involved.
Well, it's a little hypocritical as well.
No, it's not hypocritical.
Well, then they played Big Ten schedule, and I don't know, because they didn't have to play Purdue. Or no, I guess they did play Purdue. So they both played Purdue. So I don't know. I don't quite understand exactly.
You're equating Indiana and Ohio State's schedules because they both played Purdue.
Marshall had a good team. Marshall was 10-3. So I mean, that might be counted as a good team.
Ohio State played Oregon. and they played Penn State.
Yeah.
Indiana did not play either one of those teams.
Well, how much of that do they make those decisions, or is that
No, they do not make those decisions.
okay? I guess they could schedule. They don't probably. Maybe the FCS team. Maybe that would be a good team. Maybe not to. I can maybe see how that might not be the smartest decision ever to schedule FCS school.
And next season, Indiana is basically playing the same schedule. They're playing, meaning out of conference. They have scheduled 3 other high school teams to play next season.
Other high school teams?
Basically, yes,
No.
they might as well be.
They're not. So
Ohio State's playing Texas. You've heard of them. They're playing Texas next year.
yeah. Well, that's a good team. Yeah, that's good.
So Ohio State did have a garbage non-conference schedule, and I'm on record of saying that a zillion times on here. There is a condition involved, though, because Washington was on the schedule. Now, once Washington joined the Big Ten, then that schedule was changed.
Right. Well, I don't know that Washington was all that great this year, were they?
No,
They were good,
but they were much better than anyone Indiana played in non-conference play.
Yeah. Well, I understand that, but does every team they have to play have to be as good as the teams Ohio State plays? I don't exactly understand exactly why that's so important, but they said they played Washington. Indiana played Washington. They played, I guess, UNC Charlotte's not that great. Purdue was terrible. Michigan State, they weren't that good either. Maryland wasn't all that great, I guess. I mean, I know what you're coming from, but I mean, I don't know how they are supposed to do a whole lot other than just play and beat the teams they have on their schedule. And
No, the players, I'm not blaming the players, not blaming the coaches. I'm blaming the administration and the athletic department for not scheduling anyone out of conference.
I'm not sure BYU's ever beaten Indiana. I don't think they ever have.
So,
Well, that's
yes.
a good reason for why BYU. That's why Indiana went and BYU didn't. That's kind of what people need to quit complaining about the teams that go. I think they probably did the best they could to get the right teams in there. I don't think BYU would have done any better than Indiana, personally. It's hard to know, but I don't see it happening.
I am sending a challenge to you and the rest of the audience. If anyone can find a worse 11-1 schedule, a team that went 11-1 that played a worse schedule than Indiana in a power conference, then I would love to see it of all time.
They were 11-1 the year they beat BYU, I think. Weren't they 11-1 that year? I think they only lost one game that year. When they still was like
when they beat them in the Holiday Bowl.
Yeah, pretty sure. I think.
Yeah.
Or I don't think Indiana lost more than. Or maybe I'm wrong about that. Was it BYU that was 11-1? Maybe I have them reversed.
Yeah, Indiana was not 11-1 that
Yeah, it was
year.
BYU win 11-1. Yes, that's what it was.
All right, Chris. Well, I appreciate you calling tonight.
All right, thanks, Mark. Sorry to be so grumpy.
Oh, that's all right. Wait, I get grumpy myself.
Have a good night.
Have a good night, Chris.
Bye.
Last caller, and I believe we've got some super chats, so we appreciate your contributions, folks. And it looks something like this. We've got Erica's here. Mark, here's a few bucks for being so patient with certain callers. Erica, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Happy New Year, Erica. I'm sorry your Hawkeyes did not come through on the 30th, as I had predicted that they would, and they blew a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, unfortunately. And then we also have Nolan. Here's Chris's gold medal for the mental gymnastics championship. Absolutely. Absolutely on that one. Okay. We've got somebody else jumping on here, so we'll take 2 more calls. We got Michigan Man.
Hey, man. Chris, man, he's a GOAT pessimist, man. The GOAT of being a pessimist. The way he bends his mind into a pretzel just to find the most negative outlook. I mean, once you say who wins the Super Bowl, whoever wins the Super Bowl, are they really the champion? I don't know. I don't know how far you could take it, man. That I've heard some wild statements, Mark, but that one was that was out there.
Well,
Hey, Mark, I need you
go
to
ahead.
convince me not to put money on Ohio State to win the national championship. Is there is there any argument out there not to? To me, I mean,
I hope that you and everybody else are right about how dominant. Well, we've seen how dominant they've been, but they still have 2 more to go, and it's not going to be a cakewalk. That's for sure.
yeah, it's not just how dominant they've been; it's the field too, though. No one else is. I mean, you could say Penn State, but Penn State's played Group of Five competition, right? So, who in the field that's left has wowed you? Like who?
Yeah,
Texas?
nobody else has
Nobody
played
really.
anywhere close to the caliber of ball that they have the last 2 times out. You're right.
Not even close, and
No.
they haven't played dominating ball either. I wouldn't even say they. You could say Penn State again because, and I guess in ND, but they've only had one matchup. But it's not like dominant. I mean, I need to see Penn State against a real Power Four team. If like once they obviously play Georgia or Notre Dame. I got another thing to ask you. I find interesting. These. Do you think these month layoffs could be a disadvantage?
Well, so somebody brought that up, and I do think that they could be. Depends how they're being handled. Nick Saban certainly did a nice job, and Urban Meyer and other coaches with month layoffs. I went back to 2006. If I'm not mistaken, Ohio State had a 56-day layoff between the Michigan game, because there was no Big Ten championship then, and the national championship game that was played on like January 10th. That's the year they got steamrolled by Florida. They had an almost 2-month layoff. So
what did Florida have?
Well, they played in an SC. They had 1 week less. They played in the
1 week less.
championship game.
I think that's it. I think that could be a disadvantage, because
Sure.
I think especially if like these teams that didn't have the bye, they're consistently in a rhythm, right? Especially if they're playing good. If they're playing good and they can stick with that rhythm and take it into practice and whatnot, but then the other team has to sit back and wait a month, and they only get what 15. How many practices they get? 15, I think.
That's a great question. It is 15 for a bowl practice. I don't know if they've changed that for these playoff games.
So that's what's interesting, right? It's like, do they get so they get 50? Yeah, so it's not even. You know what I'm saying? Like in the NFL, you obviously there's a first round bye, but it's only a week difference.
Yeah,
I think.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I think that I do think that's interesting because if you look at all these 3 first round games today, the team that sat came out real sluggish. All of them came out sluggish. Boise, I don't even think they were good enough to beat Penn State, but Boise, ASU got themselves in a hole, and then I just thought OSU was just overall superior today, but I just think they were more ready and prepared.
Well, also,
especially.
I'm going to flip the coin on you. I'm not saying that that's not a valid take because I've already said it, so I'm right there with you. But I'm just throwing this one out there as well. And this is one of the reasons why I didn't like buys to begin with. Think about this. Once the playoff field is set, then somebody like Oregon, Ohio State's got to be, and everybody that played in the first round, it's got to be locked in on their first round matchup. And they've got to be focused, tunnel vision, boom, Tennessee. Oregon can sit back and go, okay, well, we're going to take half of our staff and they're going to scout Ohio State. The other half is going to scout Tennessee, and we can prep for all that time while Ohio State's got to be focused on Tennessee. They can't prep for Oregon.
That's true. I mean, game plan wise, for sure. I'm not sure how much that matters in this, a matchup where you've already played a team, right? But in a case where you haven't played a team, for sure that can matter. I don't know. It's just something to think about for sure. Yeah, I just don't. I think they're gonna. I don't. Texas to me, they don't look that good to me, especially offensively. I don't know. I don't know how. What do you think the formula is for Texas to be Ohio State? Because I don't know what it is.
Well, this is the only thing I'm coming up with is that we know what Ohio State's issues have been from a health standpoint up front. Now we know that they've overcome them, obviously, but Michigan certainly manhandled them up front, and they had their issues before that with Nebraska. So they're missing 2 of their top 3 offensive linemen, and they've been able to get past it, especially in pass pro. Their pass pro is almost perfect. Shoot, Will Howard drops back and probably gets rushed or flushed from the pocket, maybe 1 out of every 10 dropbacks. The other ones, he just stands there and is able to go through his progressions. There's not even a push in his face, and he delivers the ball. So their pass pro has been excellent. But the only thing I'll say there is Texas does have great talent up front. And as well as anyone that a lot of that's about the matchups up front, where maybe a certain repertoire that an edge rusher has could really give a left tackle problems, and just the combinations up front, the stunting, the way Texas does things differently with their blitz packages and with their stunting could give Ohio State some issues up front that they haven't seen.
Yeah, maybe, man. I don't know. I think it's not just they've been running the ball better too, though. Ohio State.
Well,
It's not, and that helps with the pass protection.
Yeah, they did these two games. Yeah.
And, Ohio State on defense, I've noticed they've ran a lot more, it looks like cover 1. It looks like they're putting a lot more towards the line of scrimmage, too.
Yeah.
I don't know. They've made some adjustments, man. It's tough. I think everybody should just put the money on Ohio State at this point. And I want to make a comment about the Michigan game doesn't matter as much. I'm not saying you specifically said it that way, but it only doesn't matter as much if you win the whole thing, I think, is what the caveat that needs to be said.
That's a good point. Yeah.
If you don't win the whole thing, and I think that's any year, really, because it's always a trump card, right? Oh, yeah, we beat you. Well, yeah, but we won the Natty. I think you could say that any year. But, if Ohio State doesn't win the championship, that's what the season is. You didn't win the championship, and you lost to Michigan 4 times in a row.
Yeah.
So to be able for it to not matter as much, you have to cap it off with a championship. Then yeah, I mean that's fair. We won the Natty. Sure, you beat us. We won the Natty.
No, I think it's a great point, and I think one of the best arguments in the history of this channel would have been 2 years ago. I was waiting for it to happen, but it of course didn't, because Michigan, of course, beat Ohio State. They won the Big Ten in 2022, but they lost to TCU. And then Ohio State's right there to beat Georgia. And if they would have knocked down the door and gone through and won, as we would have expected against TCU, I was salivating at the debate all off season.
We actually have an example of this.
That Michigan won the Big Ten and beat Ohio State, but Ohio State won the Natty. Yeah, go ahead.
2021.
Yeah, with Bama and Georgia.
That's a perfect example of this. Bama beat Georgia. Everyone was crapping on Kirby Smart. Oh, you can't beat Alabama, blah, blah, blah. And I know they played Bama in the championship game.
Exactly.
But I know they played Bama. Yeah, that is different. But I think if they still would have went on and win the championship, would anyone have cared that they lost to Bama?
But they got
I don't think so.
They got revenge directly against them.
That's true. I just think if they would have,
that rivalry doesn't compare to Ohio State and Michigan.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I just think a Natty trumps everything.
Like I don't have an issue with any Michigan fan. If Ohio State, they could roll 50-0 the next 2 games that says we still beat you, we own you. I have no issue with that, making that statement. Just as long as those people are consistent. That's all I ask of most people. Just that you're consistent in your argument. That's all.
And I remember 2022 too, and I was dreading you beating, or I should say, Ohio State beating Georgia, because I had that feeling of, oh man, if they win the Natty, they're not going to give a crap that they lost. I knew some people that they would have still been, we lost, but we don't really care because the feeling of winning a Natty just outweighs that. Yeah, you beat us, but we got the ultimate prize. I think that's true any year. I mean, that's like the Ole Miss. Remember when Ole Miss beat Bama back in I know it's not a rivalry, but remember when Ole Miss beat Bama back in, I think it was 2015?
They beat them in 14 and 15. Yeah.
Yeah, Bama went on to win the championship. Do you think anybody cared? I know it's not a rivalry. I get that, but
Yeah.
I just think a natty trumps really anything, and that's when you could get into we could compare natties to other natties. That's the only thing you can do at that point, honestly. But so is Jeremiah Smith? Is he? I think he's a fish. Maybe you thought this before, but I think he's miles better than Marvin Harrison at this point.
Wow, that's funny that you say that. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, he probably is.
I think he is, man. I just think he's bigger. I don't know. He's everything Marvin Harris was to me. He's a similar type of receiver, but he's just better. He's bigger, faster. Maybe not faster, but he's stronger. All that. I will say this: do you think he? But do you maybe you disagree? Do you think he pushes off a lot? This is like a little thing, but I feel like he pushes off a lot, and he gets away with it a little bit, but.
What I
don't
noticed
know.
a few times, including the touchdown that he caught against Michigan, is that after the incident at Oregon, that he's learned how to push off without extending his arms. So he is not.
Yeah, he's getting better at that. Yeah, even that one throw today, on the sideline. Maybe you remember. I mean, it was on the sideline. It was a decently deep throw.
Yeah.
I felt he pushed off on that, but at the end of the day, I mean, look, it is what it is. I mean. He's probably the best wide receiver since, you may think this sounds crazy, Julio Jones, maybe, in college. Is that crazy?
Well, since then, we could name all sorts of Clemson receivers and Odell Beckham Jr. and yeah.
Were they doing it as a true freshman, though? That's the thing.
No.
And I don't think I've ever seen a true freshman wide receiver look the physical part like he does.
Yeah.
He could. I remember we were with Trevor Lawrence. They were saying, I remember they used to say that as true freshman year. He's like, if we were gonna make an exception to the NFL rule, it would be Trevor Lawrence. I think we could say that about him as well. I think he can go in the NFL right now and dominate.
Yeah, I don't know if he'd dominate, but he'd play and play well.
Oh no, he would. All right, man. Well, go Texas, of course. I'm probably gonna secretly. Not so secret. Put money on Ohio State to win the national championship. To me, it's just like too good of a bet. I don't know why I wouldn't do it. I mean, I just don't see it, man. I don't think anyone has the offense to go with against Ohio State, and I just think Ohio State's defense is they're just playing out their mind right now. So it's sad to say, but it is what it is. We'll run this back next year. And make it 5 in a row. But till then, enjoy the rest of this playoff year because it looks like it's going to be good for you guys. All right.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Our buddy Michigan man. Again, folks, we'll take our last call here. Disputed National Champions. The link's in the description section of this video and all the videos. And I'm just telling you, you'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy it. You love college football. You're a junkie. You're a nerd like me. You'll enjoy this book, Disputed National Champions. Check it out. Links in the description section of this video. All right. And I'm going to drop it in the chat as well as we take this phone call from, we got Tom checking in. Tom, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good, Mark. Hey, the daughter always wonders what to buy you for Christmas. So back in 1st of November, I sent her a picture of your book, and so I did get that on Christmas.
Well, I appreciate that.
So that's a nice little gift, that's not expensive for her to buy.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's pretty proud that she got it for me. And
thank you.
I haven't looked at it yet, but looking forward to it. And so yeah. Mark, I called, at least I feel like at least Boise State and Arizona gave it a shot. Arizona State.
Oh,
they weren't duds.
Not at all.
So now I'm old school. The playoffs system is going to dilute things.
Yes.
And yeah, we can complain about Indiana. We can complain about teams that are in there, but I mean, Alabama and other teams didn't show me that they had any more reason to be there. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I agree.
So I don't like the playoff format, but it is what we got, right?
What do you want?
No, I'm like you. I think we only need 8 teams. I think you need to use the conference. I think it's really good that Arizona State out of the Big 12 got a chance. And if Iowa State would have beat them, they deserve a chance to play in the playoff, right? Leaving the conference champion out like it has been for years past just isn't good, whether it was Florida State last year, whatever. So I think that's a good thing about college football. Yeah, so I'm not complaining about the playoff. I mean, it is what it is. You're right. And it's all about more money. But anyway, the Ohio State, I understand. I mean, they're dominant. They look great tonight. They look great a week ago. But, you get a football game and you make 2 lousy turnovers and all of a sudden things can go bad on you. You know what I mean? And that's what I worry about as far as Ohio State goes. Yeah, they're not a cinch yet. I really would have enjoyed it last night if Boise State would have beat Ben Franklin. Franklin is the coach.
Yeah.
That would have just topped it off.
And people that didn't watch the game see the 17-point spread, or 5 years from now, if we're looking back at college football playoff results, it looks like a fairly easy win for Penn State. But I thought Boise State was impressive. I thought they were really good. And certainly they, if you remember, they threw a touchdown pass that would have cut the lead to 24-21. And there was a hands to the face call that had nothing to do with the touchdown pass. It needed to be called by the officials, so I had no issue with that. But I just hate when penalties get in the way, when they don't apply to the play, and that kind of ruined the game for Boise State, and Penn State took it from there. They won fair and square, but the game was much closer than the 17-point spread.
What I was thinking about, and the seeding has a lot to do with it, whether it's the NCAA basketball tournament or football. It's all about matchups. Bowl games, it's all about matchups. Some teams match up better with others.
Yeah.
What if Boise would have got somebody different? Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
I mean, they could be in the next round.
They could be. But who would that like who?
I haven't played that out.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it. So no. Mark, in the off season, I do need, you and I are about the same age, and so in the off season we need to talk about how great football was in the 80s.
Oh, absolutely, we will.
I mean, we want to complain about the past playoffs or the national champions or everything, but I can remember on New Year's Day, I mean, every game was a big deal. Who would win and whether you'd be the national champion.
Well, the thing is that even the ones that did not factor into the national championship were a big deal.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that we need to go back. I'm not here to go back to that, but people don't realize, what you grew up. I mean, you watched every one of them games, and it was such a big deal. And so Now I'm older now. I'm just like you. I don't watch much NFL football. Probably have only watched 2 football games. Probably won't watch one till the playoffs start. And food for thought. Now, your callers are all about and I understand that's your base that calls in, but the top 15 Blue Buds. And if you don't want Boise State, Arizona State, and Indiana in there, you make a conference with 15 football teams, the Big Ten and whatever else, and the SEC. What do you really got? Just another professional football league. So, Iowa, between 3 million people, and when both teams play at home, they have 120,000 people that come and watch them 2 teams. So you lessen things up and don't let teams have a chance. Just a chance. You're hurting college football. So, no. So anyway, those are my points tonight. I'll let you go.
Well, Tom, it's good to hear from you. I appreciate
Yep.
it. Have a good night. Happy New Year.
Yep.
All right. I believe we just got in this comment. The Elephant in the Room podcast, Bama Hoops and something. I was impressed with how patient and nice you were to certain callers. This is for always talking to us no matter our takes. Mooly, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. It doesn't take great patience or anything, but I do thank you when certain people acknowledge that I have patience with the callers. I'll take a page from my guy, Mr. Elvis Presley, who once said many times actually, when reporters would say, "Don't you get sick of these fans hounding you and screaming and tearing your clothes?" And he always said, "Hey, they can have the shirt off my back. They put it there." So if I didn't have you people calling, if I didn't have you people showing up, then I'd be talking to no one. So do I always agree with you? No. Do I think that some people call in with really stupid, asinine, moronic takes? I absolutely do. But I also have to consider I live and breathe this stuff. Many of you like work in a factory all day, or you are an accountant or do something else, and this is just something you do on the side, and you're just fans. You're fans. You love college football. You got certain takes. We all have different perspectives. We all have different opinions. But if you say things that are just logically irrational or are certainly informationally inaccurate, then I'm certainly going to put you in your place. But other than that, hey, we're all just fans of college football and enjoy the ride. So I should be here after the football game on tomorrow night. So we've got the Sugar Bowl at, I believe, 3 Eastern. Interesting time for that. I don't know why they came up with that, what the deal is, but whatever. It doesn't matter. I thought they were going to play a night game, but they're playing in the afternoon on ESPN. So interesting for the Sugar Bowl. I'm sure there was all sorts. Knowing the worldwide leader the way I do, and not that I was at some high level that I was making these kind of conversations, but being around it, man, I'm sure that there were all sorts of heavyweight decisions and conferences and conference calls and negotiating between high ticket advertisers, and we're going to lose money having it on during the afternoon, and all sorts of considerations made. But as I understand it, it's going to be a 4 p.m. Eastern time kickoff at the Sugar Bowl, and then I believe the Gator Bowl's that night. So we'll be here at the Voice of College Football following Georgia and Notre Dame. Disputed National Champions, that's a book. Check it out. The link's right below us in the description section of this video and all the videos, and we will see you on a Thursday night. God bless you and Happy New Year. Sorry, I killed my mic. You didn't hear any of that. Okay, Erica, I will do my best to answer this question. Certainly more of an off-season question, but thank you for the super chat, so I'll answer it. Here's my thought about blue bloods. I don't use the term myself. I use the term elite. So that's the term I use, meaning Clemson over the last 10 years or 15 years has been elite. Not right this second, but has been elite. But they're not a blue blood, will never be a blue blood, because the term blue blood to me, and again, I never use the term, but when it's brought up, comes from royalty. The term blue blood, meaning that you're born into this elite hierarchy. Like if you're truly of blue blood origin, you could lose all your money. You could be a bum on the street, have no money, nothing, and you're still a blue blood. You don't look like a blue blood. You don't sound like one. You don't smell like one. You're a bum on the street, but you're still a blue blood because you inherited the blue blood through a line. So it's not quite that specific in college football, but basically since the origin of the game, and I'm not going to take it all the way back to 1869 because there were only two teams playing, Rutgers and Princeton, but during the growth of the sport in like the 1920s, there was Michigan, Notre Dame, Alabama, Oklahoma, etc. The blue bloods that I consider blue bloods would be Michigan, Notre Dame, Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma, USC. Those seven for sure, because again, it goes back, and they will never lose their blue blood status. If you truly believe in the term blue blood, you don't lose blue blood status. Just like the bum on the street who lost all of his money, all of his family fortune, he's still of royal descent. He can't lose his blue blood status. He doesn't look like a blue blood. Nebraska doesn't look like a blue blood. Now, I think Penn State and Nebraska are fringe blue bloods. So put them in or take them out, whatever you want to do with them. But I use the term elite. I'm more of the elite. So all time, the seven I just mentioned are elite, certainly. But since then, there have been large stretches of time that Miami's been elite. Florida State's been elite. Clemson's been elite. Georgia currently is elite. Good example right there. Georgia. In my mind, again, this is my interpretation of it. This is not the definitive word. Georgia will never be a blue blood. They could win a zillion national championships in a row. They will never be a blue blood because they aren't a blue blood. Could they be the greatest program in history? Yes. They're elite. They're elite right now. They've been elite, but they're not a blue blood. Does that make sense? That's, again, my interpretation of it. And I'm guessing you and others have had something to say ever since I started that rant. Yes. Bevo, perfect. Miami was elite in the 80s and 90s. And I'm not saying that this is a perfect, infallible approach to it, because you could bring up Army. There's Army of Blue Blood. They were elite. They were one of the great programs in college football in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Ralph brings up Tennessee. They went through my mind, certainly in that Penn State, Nebraska category. Minnesota. These are all these things we will discuss in the offseason. We've got a lot of content to run through in the offseason, including my conference rankings, which for the first time since I've been doing those may not have the SEC at number 1. We could have a new era. We could mark time with 2024. Different conference, number 1. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you after the sugar.